If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 41 The Iron Gate. The morning sun had already burned away the mist as the truck rumbled down the cracked road. Gaius sat in the back, the steel of his blue armor shining faintly in the pale light. His helmet rested against the magnetic lock on his back plate. He kept his gaze forward, silent, his massive frame steady even as the truck jolted over potholes. Across from him sat Rei and Takashi, their rifles resting across their laps. 3 guards rode with them, men who had trained for a day under Gaius's hard but patient instruction. Each held a weapon with quiet confidence. The air inside the truck smelled of oil and old canvas, but the faint breeze through the open sides carried the sharper scent of decay. Somewhere beyond the ruined buildings, the dead shuffled and dragged their feet. The driver called back over the growl of the engine, rode ahead bends toward the school. Takashi nodded, tightening his grip on his rifle. "We're close," he said, almost to himself. Rei looked at him and gave a small, encouraging smile, but her own eyes stayed sharp. Gaius remained silent. His dark gaze swept across the city blocks they passed. Empty cars lay tipped on their sides or burned black. Windows were broken, doors left open. Shadows moved now and then between the wrecks, slow and uncertain. A moan rose from the side street just as the truck passed. 3 walkers lurched into view, arms outstretched. "Open fire," Gaius said, his voice deep and calm. The 3 guards raised their rifles without hesitation. The sharp cracks of gunfire echoed off the buildings. All 3 dead fell before the truck even slowed. Takashi shifted forward, scanning the road. Another group appeared near a broken bus stop. This time he fired first, his shot clean through the skull of the lead walker. Rei followed with 2 steady bursts, dropping the rest. Gaius watched their movements closely. Every aim, every pull of the trigger. His eyes missed nothing, but he offered no praise or rebuke. This was not training anymore. This was survival. They drove on, the guards firing short bursts whenever a stray zombie stumbled too close. The truck never stopped. Empty streets gave way to a narrow avenue lined with trees whose leaves were already brown. Through the branches, the outline of a low, wide building appeared. Hoshikawa Elementary. The metal gate around the school stood ahead, tall but simple, paint-chipped, the iron bars spotted with rust. The driver slowed and stopped a few yards away. Everyone climbed down except Gaius, who remained seated for a moment, scanning the area. His weight made the truck's suspension creak as he finally stepped off, landing on the cracked pavement with a heavy thud. One of the guards walked to the gate and rattled it. "Locked," he called back. He shook it again, but the bars barely moved. "Doesn't look like there's a key anywhere. We'll have to climb." Another guard came closer, frowning. "If we climb, we can't get the truck through. We'll have to leave it out here." The 2 men turned as Gaius approached, his shadow falling long across the ground. They straightened at once, saluting out of instinct. "Sir," the first guard said, "gate's locked tight. We can climb it, but the vehicle stays outside." Gaius gave a single nod. "I see." He stepped past them and stood before the gate. For a moment he simply looked at it. Then, without another word, he lifted one armored foot and drove it forward. The sound of tearing metal rang across the street. The heavy iron gate flew inward like paper, crashing to the ground in a burst of dust and sparks. The men and the young pair behind them froze, eyes wide. Rei whispered, "That's impossible." The crash echoed through the school grounds. From inside came a chorus of moans, low and hungry. Figures began to appear, dozens of them. Teachers in torn uniforms. Children, their small shapes moving with the same mindless hunger moving to the source of the sound. The guards hesitated, rifles wavering. Rei's breath caught at the sight of the child-sized figures. Even Takashi froze. "Fire," Gaius ordered. The single word snapped them into action. Gunfire filled the air. The smell of cordite mixed with the sick sweet stench of the dead. Rei steadied herself and fired, aiming for heads. Takashi followed, jaw tight. The guards formed a loose line and kept their aim true. The walkers fell one by one, collapsing in heaps on the cracked concrete. No one cheered when the last body hit the ground. Silence settled, broken only by the faint ringing of spent casings. "Advance," Gaius said. They moved through the ruined yard, stepping around the bodies. Gaius led, his heavy boots leaving deep prints in the dust. A sudden flash of movement caught his eye. High on the second floor of the main building, a window opened just a crack. A small hand waved weakly. Gaius raised his arm, a silent signal. The others followed his gaze and saw it too. There! One guard shouted. They headed straight for the building, rifles ready. More walkers lurched from dark corners, but the group cut them down quickly. Inside, the halls were dim and smelled of mold and blood. Classroom doors hung broken, desks overturned. Step by step they cleared each floor, gunfire sharp and controlled. At the top of the stairs they reached the room where the hand had appeared. Gaius rapped once on the door with a gauntlet fist. The door creaked open. A small child stood there, eyes wide and hollow from hunger. Behind the child, the group could see more, 8 children in all, pale and thin. One of the boys burst into tears and pointed toward the far side of the room. "Teacher Yumiko is dying," he cried. They followed his finger. Near the window lay a woman, her face grey with exhaustion. Her breathing was shallow, her lips dry and cracked. "Mother!" Takashi's voice broke as he ran to her side. He dropped to his knees, panic clear in his eyes. Gaius moved closer at once, kneeling with surprising gentleness. He studied her for a moment, then spoke calmly. "She is severely dehydrated and starving. At least 3 days without water and food." Takashi fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a small biscuit. "Here, she needs food." "Stop," Gaius said, his deep voice cutting through the room. "Do not feed her that." Takashi looked up, desperate. "But she'll die." "She will die faster if you give her food," Gaius said. "Her body cannot take it. First, water. Small sips. Slowly." Takashi hesitated, then dropped the biscuit, pulling a bottle from his pack. He held it to his mother's lips and tilted it carefully. She drank, barely a mouthful at a time. Color began to return to her cheeks. One of the children, a girl with tangled hair, spoke softly. "Teacher Takashi didn't eat anything. She gave all the food and water to us. Even when she was too weak, she stood and waved when we heard the shooting. We helped her to the window so you could see." Ari's eyes shone as she listened. The guards said nothing, their expressions somber. Gaius straightened. "Bring the children to the truck," he ordered. The guards began to gather the weak and trembling children. Gaius turned to the unconscious woman. Takashi tried to lift her, but the weight of his rifle and pack made it awkward. "I can carry her," Takashi insisted. Gaius shook his head. "Focus on the children. And your weapon." "I will carry her." Before Takashi could protest again, Gaius lifted the woman with surprising care, holding her as if she weighed nothing. Outside, the truck waited. The children were helped aboard first. Space was tight, the benches crowded. With Takashi's mother lying across their laps and the children packed close, there was no room left for the giant in blue. One of the guards stepped forward. "Sir, I can stay behind and walk with you." "No," Gaius said firmly. "Drive. Take them back to the estate. Full speed, but stay alert for the dead." The driver hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir." The engine roared to life. As the truck began to roll, one of the boys looked back at the towering figure standing in the road. "Why isn't he coming with us?" "There isn't enough space," a guard explained gently. "And he won't leave anyone behind." The truck picked up speed, rattling down the cracked street. Gaius remained still until it was a distant shape. Then he moved. At first he jogged, the ground trembling beneath each step. Then he accelerated, his pace quickening until he was running beside the truck, his armor gleaming in the sunlight. His strides were long and powerful, each one covering meters with ease. The children and adults pressed to the side of the truck, staring in open amazement. One boy clapped his hands and shouted over the roar of the engine. "Gundam! P.S. Hey, I just uploaded the chapter today instead of tomorrow, since tomorrow I'll be busy then, might not have time to do so." Chapter 42 The Men Who Claimed a Street. The days after the rescue at Hoshikawa Elementary passed in a blur of work and steady progress. The Takagi estate had changed. The big walls still stood, but now the courtyard bustled with families, students, and the scientists and doctors Gaius had brought back from the city. Trucks and old vans came and went through the gates. Gunfire no longer echoed every hour, most of the nearby districts had been cleared of the dead. Thanks to Tony Stark's steady delivery of ammunition, guns, and supplies, patrols carried plenty of bullets, and the guards had begun to expand their routes farther each day. Some of the vehicles were rusty and loud, patched together from scavenged parts, but they ran. Each one meant more supplies, more survivors, and a little more hope. Late one afternoon, sunlight slanted through tall windows of an upstairs office that once served as a private study. Maps and reports covered the heavy wooden desk. Gaius sat behind it, his massive frame filling the chair. His blue and gold armor caught the light in soft glints. The helmet rested on the magnetic plate of his backpack, silent and still. He worked quickly but with care, reading each sheet and writing short notes. His handwriting was neat and clear, every sentence a simple instruction or solution. Soichiro Takagi sat to his right, acting as assistant and messenger. He had learned to keep pace, taking each finished page and setting it into neat stacks for the runners who waited outside. Across from them, Saeko Busujima sat in quiet readiness. She cleaned her katana with steady hands, the soft rasp of cloth against steel the only sound besides the scratch of Gaius's pen. On another table lay folders for the scientists and doctors they had rescued. In the last few days Gaius had led small teams to a university lab and to a large hospital, each mission completed without delay or loss. The specialists now worked in a converted wing of the estate, with centrifuges, microscopes, and cold storage units salvaged from the hospital. Their task was simple to state and hard to achieve: study the infection and make a vaccine for it. Gaius had already written a plan for them, daily schedules, safety rules, and the equipment list they needed. Soichiro would deliver those instructions as soon as this meeting ended. A firm knock broke the quiet. "Come in," Gaius said without looking up. The door opened and Takashi stepped inside. His posture held new strength. His mother was recovering well, and he carried himself like a man with purpose. "What is it, Takashi?" Gaius asked, eyes still on the page. "Our patrol ran into a gunfight near the old police station district," Takashi reported. "No one was hurt. The shooters kept yelling that they rule that area. They even used loudspeakers while they fired." Gaius set his pen down and lifted his head. "They claim to rule the area." "Yes," Takashi said. "That's what they called out while attacking." Gaius rose, the chair groaning as he stood to his full height. "I will deal with it personally." Takashi gave a short nod, almost a salute. Days under Gaius's direction had left their mark. Saeko slid her cleaned blade back into its sheath and stood. "I will go as well," she said. Gaius met her eyes for a moment and inclined his head. "Very well." He knew she was ready. Stark had already made her a fitted undersuit of light armor, thin enough to hide beneath her clothes yet strong enough to stop small-caliber rounds. Only her head remained unprotected. They gathered weapons and gear without wasted motion. Outside, a driver readied an old truck that had already survived many patrols. Its engine was noisy but reliable. Takashi followed them out. "I'm coming too," he said. Gaius studied him for a second, then nodded. "Stay close to the vehicle and follow orders." The truck rattled through quiet streets lined with broken windows and burned-out cars. Afternoon light slanted between buildings as they drove toward the police station district. The engine's growl carried far in the silence. It also carried to the men they had come to confront. Figures appeared on rooftops and behind makeshift barricades of sandbags and furniture. A rifle shot cracked the air and sparked off the truck's side panel. The driver braked hard. Gaius stepped down from the rear of the truck, the pavement shaking under his weight. The armored giant filled the street like a living wall of metal. The gunman stared, shocked by the sight. Thinking it was the military, and from the looks of it, they were here to take care of them, many men wanted to surrender, as it seemed it was the military. A man who seemed to be their leader recovered first, saw the situation of his men. He lifted his rifle and fired. "Shoot them!" he shouted. "We can't be spared for what we've done, kill them." The gunmen abandoned any thought of surrender. They understood that what they had done was already enough to earn the death penalty. Bullets whipped through the air. Saeko leapt from the truck, moving with a speed that startled the defenders. A shot struck her side but slid off the hidden armor. She never slowed. Gaius walked forward without hurry. Each heavy step thudded against the cracked street. Bullets hammered his chest and shoulders, sparks jumping off the blue ceramite plates. Every time a shooter aimed for his head, he tilted or sidestepped a split second before they fired, as if he already knew where the bullets would go. Saeko reached the first gunman in a flash. Her sword cut him down in one clean motion. The sudden kill drew every eye to her. Several men turned their rifles her way. Stone chips flew as bullets tore into the crumbled wall she dove behind. She waited, calm, for her next opening. Gaius kept advancing. His footfalls were deep and steady, like a drumbeat in the smoke. He towered over the nearest attacker and swung once. The punch crushed the man's chest and hurled him back into two others. Fear rippled through the line. One shooter dropped his weapon and raised his hands, pleading. Gaius did not stop. He struck the man across the head, the neck twisting with a sharp crunch as the body fell. Another fired wildly. Gaius brushed the rifle aside and landed a heavy blow that dropped him on the spot. Saeko moved again, swift and silent. Her blade flashed, cutting down two more before they could aim. Only the leader remained. His pistol shook as he emptied the magazine at Gaius's face. Gaius tilted his head just enough for each round to hiss past, closing the distance one calm step at a time. The gun clicked empty. The man froze, eyes wide. Gaius raised his armored fist and brought it down. The single strike dropped the leader instantly. Smoke drifted in thin threads through the street. The remaining guards from the estate moved forward to secure weapons and check the fallen. Saeko wiped her blade clean with a calm, practiced motion. Takashi stepped carefully among the bodies, his face tight but steady. He had seen the dead before, but this was different, men who had chosen violence and paid for it. Without a word, Gaius turned back toward the truck. Saeko followed, her sword resting easily at her side. Takashi came last, his eyes on the empty street as the wind carried the smell of blood and gunpowder away. Chapter 43 Passing the Torch. The estate gates swung open with a low groan as the truck rolled in. The night air smelled faintly of smoke from the city. Lanterns burned along the courtyard walls, throwing wide pools of yellow light across the stone path. People waiting near the gate stepped back when they saw the returning patrol. Gaius climbed down first. His heavy blue and gold armor caught the lamplight, polished metal shining in places where gunfire had left small marks. Saeko followed, sword still in its sheath but ready. Takashi and the rest of the team also climbed down from the vehicle. Gaius said nothing as he crossed the courtyard. He moved with the same steady weight as always, each step measured and sure. Saeko walked at his side, her face calm, though her eyes scanned the crowd like a silent guard. Together they entered the main building and climbed the stairs to the office. Suichiro Takagi was already waiting when they arrived, Yuriko and Saya standing beside him. A few senior guards filled the room. Papers covered the big desk, maps marked with red circles where food and fuel had been found. Gaius stood at the head of the table. "The enemy at the police station area are eliminated," he said. His voice was even, carrying easily to every corner. "Tomorrow at first light, you all move to secure the area. All weapons, food and medicine left behind will be collected. Any survivors hiding nearby will be brought back here. Safety is first priority. Move in teams, keep the radio contact open, and avoid unnecessary fire." Suichiro nodded and began noting names of those who would lead each squad. "Understood." Gaius gave a final glance around the room. "Make sure any wounded survivors are treated on, but safety our priority. No mistakes." The meeting continued only a few minutes longer. When it ended, Suichiro dismissed the guards to prepare their teams. The room slowly emptied until only Gaius and Saeko remained. As the door closed, a faint glow flickered at the edge of Gaius's vision. He recognized it at once, the quiet pulse of the multiversal chat. It appeared like a translucent panel only he could see. System message. Mission: help Saeko Busujima. Objective 1: escort and safeguard Saeko as the apocalypse begins. Completed. Objective 2: establish a safe base for humans. Completed. Optional: cleanse the dangers of the world. Not yet completed. Additional reward available. Gaius focused on the message. Another line formed beneath it: accept reward. He reached for it with his mind. The screen shifted. Choose one reward. Indomitable will, strengthen your mind and spirit. Fear and corruption cannot break you. Titan body, strengthen your body in every way. The choice required no debate. He thought of the demons and warp creatures he had faced in past wars, enemies that attacked not flesh but the mind itself. He had once nearly fallen to such a thing, a memory that never left him. Indomitable will. He made the choice. For a moment there was no change. Then a quiet steadiness spread through him. His thoughts sharpened. Distractions faded. It was not a surge of power, only a clear, unwavering calm, as if every doubt had been set aside, though there were no doubt to even begin with. The message shifted again. Reward applied. Mission, help Saeko Busujima. Objectives 1 and 2, completed. Optional, cleanse the dangers of the world. Ongoing. Will you return now? Yes/no. Time limit, 1 year. Gaius studied the words. Return now, or wait. He looked around the office. The estate still needed structure. The world outside was far from safe. He blinked once, and the screen faded as he chose no. He needed to do some things before going back to his own universe. He also know that he has limited time he can stay here, as the Oath of Rectitude are on the warp, and are only days away from Terra, as he is also needed there. He called for Suichiro, Yuriko, Saya, and Saeko to return. When they gathered again, Gaius stood behind the desk. The faint sound of guards drilling in the courtyard drifted through the window. My mission here is complete, he said. At first no one spoke. Then Saeko tilted her head slightly. You plan to leave? Her voice was calm, but there was a quiet weight behind the question. Suichiro frowned. Leave? Sir Gaius, we still rely on you. Our defenses, our ammunition, most of it comes from you. Saya crossed her arms, her sharp eyes fixed on Gaius. People see you as the reason this place is safe. If you go, that changes everything. Gaius rested his gauntlet hands on the desk. The mission was to keep Saeko alive and build a base where humanity could survive. Both are done. The estate is strong enough to stand without me. He turned to Saeko. She will handle supplies from now on. Suichiro looked at Saeko and then back at Gaius. Can she also supply the guns and ammunitions like you do? Yes, she can do it as well, Gaius said. His voice left no space for doubt. The older man took a slow breath, then gave a small nod. I see. Gaius stepped around the desk and placed a heavy hand on Suichiro's shoulder. You have kept this estate steady even when the world collapsed. You will continue to lead. With the supplies we have and the teams you command, this base will hold. Suichiro met his gaze and straightened. His own military training came back in a sharp salute. Yes, sir. Gaius returned the salute, a small but solid gesture of respect for this person. Saeko moved closer. Thank you, Gaius, she said softly. He gave a single nod in reply. By the next morning the entire community had gathered in the main courtyard. Survivors filled the balconies and lined the walls. The sky was pale with early light. Gaius stood on the steps with Suichiro beside him. From this day, Gaius said, his voice carrying across the quiet crowd, Suichiro Takagi resumes full command of this estate. He has my trust and my respect. A ripple moved through the people, sadness, but no panic. They had seen Gaius fight and protect them, but they also trusted the Takagi family. Many bowed. A few of the armed guards saluted. No one spoke against the change. Suichiro stepped forward. With the resources we now hold, we will remain strong. Continue your duties. Keep watch. We survive together. The crowd slowly broke apart, voices low but steady. Some guards lingered, clearly unhappy to see Gaius go, but discipline held. Later that afternoon, Suichiro, Yuriko, Saya, and Saeko walked with Gaius to the open field behind the main house. The grass waved gently in the breeze, the distant city a faint haze on the horizon. Saeko was the first to speak. Goodbye, Gaius, she said simply. Suichiro and Yuriko followed, offering quiet thanks and well wishes. Saya added a small nod, her usual sharp tone softened. Gaius looked at each of them in turn. Lead well, he said. Protect each other. They waited, unsure what would happen next. No vehicle stood ready. No aircraft circled above. Light began to shimmer around Gaius's armor, soft at first, then brightening until it outlined his massive frame. The glow spread, turning his form into countless tiny sparks. Yuriko gasped. Saya stepped back in shock. Suichiro's eyes widened as the last of the armored giant dissolved into the air. Only Saeko remained still, watching with calm acceptance. Suichiro found his voice at last. You truly were a warrior from the stars, he said quietly. Chapter 44 Return to the Oath of Rectitude. The soft blue glow of data slate lights filled the chamber as Gaius reappeared aboard the Oath of Rectitude. Steel walls hummed with the low power of the ship's heart. The air smelled faintly of machine oil and ozone. For a long moment he stood still, letting the quiet weight of the strike cruiser settle around him. It's been days had passed since he was in Saeko's world. Yet when he looked at the ship's internal chronometer, barely a handful of hours had slipped by. Time in that other world are much faster than in this universe. He exhaled once, a calm breath that echoed lightly in the metal room. Gaius stepped from his chamber. The corridor beyond gleamed under cold white strips of light. He passed crew serfs who bowed or offered short salutes as he walked by. Each movement was practiced, respectful but without fear. He gave a single nod to each of them, the heavy steps of his armored boots ringing steadily against the deck. The command deck opened before him like the heart of a great cathedral. Hollow projectors glowed with star maps and warp charts. Pilots and servitors worked in quiet discipline, hands moving across controls with the precision of long habit. "Greeting, Captain Gaius," a junior officer said, voice sharp and clear. Gaius moved toward the central display. "Report," he said simply. The senior pilot straightened. "A few more days to Terra, Captain." The pilot continued. "The warp grew violent a few hours ago," he said, "but then, it became unnaturally calm. It is stable now, at least that's what the navigator said." The assistant pilot nodded to confirm. "The Astronomicon burns larger and brighter. The path to Terra is open and clear, according to the navigator." Gaius studied the shifting lights of the hollow map. Such calm should not exist in the immaterium. The warp was chaos given form, a place of storms and shifting madness. Even after a storm broke, it never became this quiet. "I see," he said softly. As the bridge crew continued their duties, Gaius let his mind turn inward. Few in the Imperium would dare think of the Emperor without reverence. Yet Gaius's thoughts were steady and clear. He was one of the first Primaris Marines forged by Belisarius Cawl, shaped from the very edge of science and gene-craft. Robert Guilliman himself had overseen his training and education. To Gaius, Guilliman was not a distant godlike figure but a commander, a teacher, and, at times, a patient guide. From Guilliman he had learned that the Emperor never wished to be worshipped. The Codex Astartes, the sacred text to so many chapters, was meant as guidance, not holy scripture. Guilliman had told him more than once, "Reason is our strength. Blind faith is a chain." Because of this, Gaius could stand on the bridge of a starship and think of the Emperor not as a distant divinity but as the architect of humanity's future. He could speak of Guilliman with respect, not trembling awe. And now the warp itself seemed to bend in his path, calm and bright as if pointing the way. Was the Emperor calling him? Was it the Emperor who summoned him through Guilliman? Or was it something tied to the multiversal system that had taken him to another world and back that the Emperor notices it and summoned him? He did not know. But the thought remained. "I will learn the reason on Terra," he decided. Until then, he would wait. The next few days passed in a steady rhythm. Gaius inspected the ship's armories, reviewed crew reports, and spent hours in silent meditation and reading. The warp outside stayed calm, a rare mirror of still waters. No demonic echoes whispered at the edges of hearing. No storms flared against the hull. Nothing was hitting the Geller field. For Gaius, it was almost unsettling. He had travelled through the immaterium countless times and seen what lived there. Calm like this came only a few times in a lifetime, and never after such sudden turmoil. When the final day came, the oath of rectitude slid from the warp with a deep, rolling sound like distant thunder. The black of real space unfolded across the viewing ports. Stars burned cold and sharp. Before them lay the heart of mankind's empire. The Sol system stretched wide, its planets turning in ancient silence around the sun. And ahead, Terra itself gleamed faintly behind the golden light of the Astronomicon. The strike cruiser moved forward. Colossal orbital defense platforms soon filled the void, steel and adamant as large as cities. Shipyards and void stations floated like vast continents of metal, each bristling with weapons capable of tearing a battle fleet apart. The bridge was quiet except for the soft clicks of instruments and the low hum of the engines. Gaius stood at the central console, watching the home world of humanity draw closer. A sharp burst of sound cut through the quiet. The vox crackled to life, a voice firm and commanding. "Unidentified vessel, you are entering the Sol defense perimeter. Identify yourselves at once." Without hurry, Gaius took the mic. "This is Captain Gaius of the Ultramarines. We are ordered by the Lord Regent of the Imperium to proceed to Terra." The channel went silent for a heartbeat. Then the reply came, clipped and clear. "Authorization confirmed. Welcome, Captain Gaius. Proceed." Across the void, massive defense arrays shifted. The weapons that had locked onto the cruiser slowly lowered, their threat withdrawn. Gaius turned slightly. "Pilot," he said, "take us to the primary orbital dockyards and spires around Terra." "Aye, Captain," the pilot answered, hands already guiding the ship into a slow descent. Soon the great Thunderhawk gunship was prepared. Gaius boarded with a group of Ultramarines and a handful of trusted serfs. The engines roared to life, deep and powerful, and the craft separated from the strike cruiser. Through the wide viewing ports, Terra filled their vision. The planet was no longer a world of oceans and forests. Its entire surface had become a single endless city, a hive world beyond imagination. Towering spires and fortress works rose where mountains once stood. Manufactoria and forge complexes burned like a field of stars. The few stretches of open land were nothing but ash deserts and poisoned plains. Green oceans had long ago given way to black smoke. They plunged into the upper atmosphere. Thick black clouds of industrial smog rolled across their path. The Thunderhawk cut through them, engine steady. Below, the light of countless cities burned through the haze like scattered embers. The airspace grew crowded as they descended. Gunships streaked by in tight formations. Heavy bulk lifters rumbled through the clouds. Pilgrim craft drifted under the guidance of Adeptus Mechanicus machines. Cathedral spires broke through the smoke like the blades of titans. A sharp signal flared across the Vox. An Adeptus Arbit's vulture gunship swept into view, dark and bristling with weaponry. "Thunderhawk, halt your descent," the voice ordered. "Identify and divert to custodian-controlled landing pad Delta 7. At the controls, young Serf Marcus glanced back, eyes uncertain. "Sir." Gaius's voice was steady. "Follow their instructions. The Arbits are the Emperor's law." "Aye, Captain," Marcus said, adjusting their course. The Thunderhawk banked smoothly and descended toward the marked platform. Below, squads of Arbits waited in black armor, their weapons ready. Custodian guard sentinels stood behind them like living statues of gold, silent and watchful. The gunship settled onto the pad with a deep hiss of hydraulics. Engines cooled, the sound fading into the heavy air of Terra. Gaius rose from his seat, the deck trembling lightly under the weight of his armor. Beyond the ramp, the Emperor's world stretched in endless grey and gold, a place of unyielding power and ancient duty. Whatever call had brought him here, the answers lay ahead. The Thunderhawk settled on the wide landing pad with a hiss of cooling vents. Around it, the harsh lights of Terra's orbital dockyard gleamed off lines of gunmetal barricades. Adeptus Arbits waited in formation, their black carapace armor polished to a dull shine, weapons lowered but ready. Captain Gaius of the Ultramarine stepped down first. His blue and gold plate caught the light as his 5 warriors followed, 3 veteran Astartes and 2 Primaris brothers. A dozen serfs carried supplies behind them. The Arbit's commander raised a hand. "Captain, for entry you will submit to verification. Gene-scan and command codes." Gaius said nothing. He stood still while mechadendrites whirred around him, reading the gene seed markers that proved his lineage. His armor's heraldry, the Ultramarine's Omega and his own sigil, recorded long ago in Gilliman's archives, flashed across a cogitator screen. One by one, the Arbits confirmed the other Marines. After long minutes the commander finally inclined his head. "Records match. Lord Regent's summons verified. You may proceed." As the Arbits stepped back, a low metallic thrum rolled across the pad. The Astartes turned. From the far gate a figure approached, towering even over them. A custodian. He came alone, each step measured. Auramite plate glowed like a moving sun. His spear rested easily in one hand. When he reached the group he removed his helm, revealing a face of stern symmetry and eyes as bright as polished bronze. "I will be escorting you once more, Gaius," the custodian said, voice deep as a struck bell. The Ultramarines behind Gaius stared in quiet awe. Few Space Marines ever stood so close to the Emperor's own guardians. Gaius stepped forward without hesitation and extended his hand. "Then I thank you again, Aurelius Kalian Thryx." The custodian clasped his hand firmly. It has been some time. A memory flickered through Gaius's mind. Years earlier, when he was newly forged by Belisarius Call, it was Thryx who had first brought him to Guilliman. Their bond had grown through shared campaigns and long discussions during those early days. Friendship, not ceremony, defined them. Beside them, a sleek Coronis grav carrier waited. Its golden hull shimmered with layered shields, faint hums betrayed weapons hidden beneath elegant panels. Doors parted with a hiss of sanctified air. "Come," Thryx said. The squad boarded. The grav carrier rose smoothly, engines whispering as it slid into the heavy air lanes. Smog and ash swept across the viewports. Below lay the endless sprawl of Terra, continent-wide cities, towers like mountains, rivers of light and smoke. Gaius watched in silence. Even after all his wars, the scale of humanity's cradle always held weight. The craft cut through layer after layer of security. Gates of adamantine and ormite opened at Thryx's signal. Custodian squads stood sentinel at every point, motionless as statues, their armor burning in the dim half-light. At last the vehicle slowed within the Sanctum Imperialis itself, a Gothic megalithic complex so vast it defied reason. Spires the size of mountains clawed upward into the polluted sky. Inside, golden halls stretched beyond sight, black marble floors gleaming under torchlight. The air was thick with incense and the low drone of billions of adepts chanting prayers and data cant. The Coronis eased to a stop before a set of towering gates. Waiting beyond stood the Lord Regent of the Imperium. Rabut Gil-Iman. The Primarch's towering form was framed by the Victrix Guard, his chosen warriors, each a Primaris in immaculate blue and gold. Their armor bore laurels of victory and the scars of 100 campaigns. Power-fielded shields rested at their sides, and their visors glimmered like sapphire glass. The 5 Ultramarines who had traveled with Gaius dropped to one knee as soon as they saw their Gene-sire. Awe shone in their eyes. Gaius did not kneel. He strode forward, the sound of his boots echoing across the vast chamber. Guilliman's stern face softened into a broad smile. A low laugh rolled through the hall. Stand up, he said to the kneeling Marines. You need not kneel. He stepped toward Gaius, studying him. You truly never wished to join my Victrix Guard. You even left your armor here. I did, Gaius answered calmly. I wanted to fight the enemies of mankind, not stand in halls. Gil-Iman chuckled, a warm sound amid the cold grandeur. I know. Then his expression turned serious. Walk with me. We must speak in private. He glanced to his honor guard. See to our guests. The Victrix Guard nodded and gently guided the other Ultramarines away. Gil-Iman led Gaius down a side passage into the Strategium, his war office. Hollow maps of the galaxy filled the air, the great rent of the cicatrix maledictum, lines of battle, shifting tides of war. Servitors glided between cogitator banks, their voices a low mechanical murmur. Gil-Iman gestured to a chair across the great strategy table. Sit. Gaius complied, the black marble cool even through his armor. Gil-Iman's eyes met his, steady and bright. My father gave me a vision, the Primarch said quietly. A vision of you, no, of us. Gaius listened without a word. He showed me your gift to cross into other worlds, Gil-Iman continued. And he told me to bring you to the Golden Throne. Gaius's brow tightened. In decades of service beside the Lord Regent he had never been allowed near the throne, much less summoned. Will I even be permitted entry? Yes. Gil-Iman's voice held certainty. The custodes have received the same vision. Father's will is known to them. Gaius nodded slowly. He understood well how the Emperor's own creations were attuned to his presence. If the custodes accepted such a call, there could be no mistake. Gil-Iman rose and pressed a rune on the wall. A circular chamber opened, its edges glowing with faint blue wards. Come. We will use the secure teleporterium. Side by side they stepped into the chamber. Light flared, and in an instant they stood before the Eternity Gate. It loomed like a mountain of ormite and adamantine, guarded by the aquiline shield and ranks of custodians beyond counting. Psychic wards thrummed in the air. Without a word the Golden Warriors opened a path, their eyes acknowledging the Primarch and the Captain. Through the vast processional hall they walked, the silence broken only by the hum of null emitters. Custodians lined the route in endless ranks, motionless as statues of living gold. At the final portal, another pair of guardians stepped aside. Gil-Iman inclined his head in brief thanks. The doors opened. They entered the throne room. The chamber dwarfed even the greatest cathedrals. The golden throne itself rose like a mountain of gold and living machinery. Great cables and conduits stretched outward, carrying the sacrifice of 1,000 psychers each day. Tech priests moved like insects at its base, chanting their endless litanies. The psychic pressure was overwhelming, a storm that pressed even on a space marine's mind. Upon the throne sat the Emperor of Mankind, corpse-like, yet alive. His body was withered, bound in ancient mechanisms, but his presence filled the hall like a sun. Gaius felt his vision shift. The marble floor, the golden machinery, even the air itself fell away. He stood in the warp. Before him burned a vast, searing sun. Its light filled every corner of his being. A voice like 1,000 thunderclaps struck into his soul. Son of Guilliman! My tool! My weapon! My champion! Otherworlder! Each word was a hammer blow. Pain lanced through his mind. Even if he could endure it, the pain was excruciating. Then as if the sun saw it was injuring Gaius, it backed off. Then the great sun split. A smaller sphere of light drifted forward, its glow softer, its voice gentler. Son of Guilliman, it said. I have seen your ability to walk between worlds. The words vibrated through him, warm and clear. But before the presence could continue, a flicker cut across Gaius's vision. The multiversal chat. A translucent panel only he could see. Tony, hey at Gaius, I might need some assistance. System message. Mission, help Tony Stark. Objective 1, defeat or kill Abomination. Objective 2, defeat or kill Hulk. 0/2, number of people who can accept the mission. Reward, the reward changes, depends who accepted it. The multiversal chat. Here, of all places. The smaller sun rippled as if startled. The vast psychic light quivered in answer. Chapter 46 The Emperor's Gift. Light surrounded Gaius, a sea of gold without horizon or floor. There was no sense of distance, only a warm brilliance that filled every corner of his mind. He stood in his black and blue war plate, yet felt weightless, as if the armor was part of the light itself. A smaller sun floated before him. It glowed gently, no larger than a man, its surface shifting with soft flares. When it spoke, the voice carried not through air but through thought. Even if I cannot see it, the sun said, I can feel your mind. Gaius stiffened. Few things in the galaxy could surprise a space marine, yet those words did. You can see my memory, Emperor. His voice echoed into the light. The sun brightened and dimmed like a slow heartbeat. Before you vanished from this reality for a short time, yes. After you returned, I could not. Your will is stronger than before. I can still feel your thoughts, but I cannot read them. The answer settled heavily inside Gaius. So the multiversal chat did this, he thought. The last reward hardened my mind even against him. The Emperor continued, as if following the feeling rather than the words. I sensed a strange change in you, something beyond my reach. I tested you, and I was right. You can see something I cannot. Is it the multiversal chat? Gaius let the silence stretch. To hide or to speak? The Emperor already knew enough. It is, he said at last. His voice stayed calm. It is the multiversal chat. A pause. Then he asked the question that had been waiting in his thoughts since the first moment. Why do you sound so human? The records in my Primarch Guilliman say you are more than that. The light pulsed, warmer now. I am the little that remains of my humanity, the Emperor said. The rest is sacrifice. The words were neither proud nor sad. They were simply true. The golden sun drifted closer. I will assist you from now on, Gaius. Its glow grew stronger until it filled his vision. He raised a hand on instinct but felt no heat. The sun touched his chest and flowed inside like liquid fire. A rush of strength surged through every nerve. In his mind the Emperor's voice echoed, steady and certain. I still cannot see the multiversal chat. Darkness closed around him for a heartbeat, and then the world returned. Cold marble pressed against his knees. The sound of chanting filled his ears, the low voices of priests and the deep hum of ancient machines. He was back in the throne room of Terra. Gaius swayed. A heavy hand caught his shoulder and steadied him. Robert Guilliman, Lord Commander of the Imperium, stood beside him. Easy, Guilliman said, his voice low but sure. The dizziness faded as quickly as it had come. A new sensation followed, an ache that started in his chest and spread outward. His armor groaned as if the ceramite itself resisted what came next. Veins rose across his skin like cords. Bones stretched. Muscles swelled. Pain burned through every organ. Gaius did not move or cry out. He held his ground as the change swept through him. The growth reached its peak. He felt taller, heavier, then denser, as though every cell had been reforged. The pressure eased. His breath came deep and slow. The black undersuit beneath his armor pulled tight, and the blue and gold plate strained to contain the larger frame. Guilliman watched with open curiosity, then a faint smile. "It seems you will need new armor, my son," he said. "And a weapon that fits your new strength." Before Gaius could answer, a quiet voice filled his mind once more. "I want you to travel to another universe," the Emperor said. "Breathe the air of humanity untainted by the warp." Another universe. The words carried weight but no fear. Gaius thought back without speaking aloud. "I will need new armor and a weapon first." A soft hiss came from the far side of the chamber. A tall custodian entered through a narrow door, carrying a long black case marked with gold sigils. He bowed deeply to Guilliman, then set the case at his feet. Guilliman opened it with care. Inside lay a suit of armor that seemed to hold the light of the Emperor himself. The plate shone a deep ormite gold, chased with the rich ultramarine blue of Guilliman's own chapter. The left pauldron bore the white omega, crisp against the dark enamel. Across the chest, the imperial aquila stretched its wings, each feather etched with tiny scripture. Laurel leaves wound across the vambraces and greaves. At the helm's crest a thin halo device curved like a crown, ready to project a soft aureate shine. Even in the vast throne room the armor seemed alive, a quiet hum beneath its surface. Holy fire glimmered faintly along the engraved lines, as if a piece of the Emperor's own light rested within. Guilliman studied it for a long moment, pride and something like envy in his eyes. "The Emperor foresaw your need," he said. "It is already prepared. But you will still require a weapon worthy of it." Gaius stepped forward and placed a gauntlet hand on the breastplate. A low vibration answered his touch, steady and warm. "Yes," he said evenly. "The weapon can wait. The Emperor has asked for something first." Guilliman's smile deepened, quiet but unmistakably warm. "I see. Then we will see you equipped for what comes next." He rested a massive hand on Gaius's shoulder, the gesture both command and blessing. "Wherever this new path leads, remember, you are not only my son, but the Emperor's as well." Chapter 47 Golden Intervention. Harlem was a war zone. Tony Stark streaked above 125th Street in a blur of red-gold light, repulsors whining as he banked hard to avoid a chunk of concrete the size of a motor. Below him the Abomination, a mountain of muscle and bone, roared and hurled another slab ripped from the street. Cars lay crumpled. Storefronts burned. Sirens wailed in the distance, useless against a creature that could toss a bus. Tony fired a pair of micromissiles. They curved in, struck the monster's back, and burst in a white flash. The blast staggered it for all of 2 seconds. "Yeah, that's what I thought," Tony muttered. "Barely tickles." Through the helmet hood he caught a glimpse of the Hulk smashing through a wall to keep pace. The green giant slammed into the Abomination, driving it into the pavement. For a heartbeat the street shook under their combined weight. Then J.A.R.V.I.'s voice sounded in his ear. "Sir, you might wanna answer the call, it's General Thaddeus Ross." Tony surprised General Ross, and answered it. Then a voice crackled in Tony's ear, sharp and cold. "Stark, this is General Ross. Leave the area. That creature is a U.S. military asset. You do not have clearance to engage." Tony rolled his eyes, dodging another flying hunk of asphalt. "With respect, General, your asset is throwing taxis at civilians. I'm not leaving." Ross didn't reply to him directly. Tony heard the general bark into a loudspeaker behind the line of tanks. "Suppress the Hulk. Do not let him kill Blonsky. Open fire." On the street Betty Ross shouted back, her voice breaking. "Stop it. Don't hurt him." The order came too late. Tracer rounds lit the night, hammering at Hulk. Enraged, the green giant turned and swatted a Humvee aside. In that instant the Abomination clawed its way up from the cracked pavement. Freed from the dog pile, it grinned, grabbed a bent car door, and hurled it like a discus at the soldiers. Screams followed as the metal sheet whirled toward them. Tony dove, firing a micromissile mid-flight. The door exploded into harmless shards before it could slice through the troops. "You're welcome," he muttered. The creature roared, noticing Iron Man's interference. Its yellow eyes swept the street and locked on a rowhouse window where a small family huddled, father, mother, a girl no older than 6. The child peeked out, saw the monster, and shrieked. "Oh no you don't," Tony said, heart climbing. Abomination charged, smashing through the wall with a shower of bricks. The parents shielded their daughter as dust filled the air. Tony rocketed forward, but his targeting system screamed warnings. The family was too close for missiles or a repulsor blast. Fine, old-fashioned way it is. He slammed shoulder first into the creature, driving it sideways through another wall. They crashed across the street. Abomination barely budged. It grinned, caught Tony's right arm mid-swing, and with brutal ease flung him into the pavement. Sparks burst across Tony's HUD as systems failed. Flight stabilizers offline. Repulsor output critical. Before he could recover, the monster seized him again and hurled him toward a brick facade. Tony braced, firing thrusters to slow the impact. Nothing. Power was gone. The wall rushed closer. And then he stopped. A massive hand caught him from behind, firm but controlled. Tony spun in surprise. A towering figure stood there, over 12 feet tall, encased in gleaming gold armor that reflected the firelight. The plates were thick, shaped with sweeping lines and heavy ridges. A broad pauldron bore a familiar stylized U picked out in blue. Jarvis measured automatically. Height, 3.6 meters. Mass, 990 kilograms / 2,182.58 pounds. Tony blinked. No way. The giant turned its helmeted head. With a hiss of servos, the golden helm unlocked and lifted. A stern, and calm face, almost regal. Gaius! Tony shouted over the din. The warrior gave a single nod. Stark? Tony let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Didn't know you big guys are still in growth stage, and nice new armor by the way, very low-key. Gaius resealed the helm with a click. Blue optics flared. Across the street the abomination staggered from the wreckage, yellow eyes narrowing. It mistook the newcomer for another armored suit. New armor won't save you, Stark. It roared, crouching for a charge. Gaius stepped forward, moving Tony gently aside with one hand. Stay clear. The monster lunged, swinging a fist of a size larger than a person's head. Gaius met the blow head-on, one gauntlet arm rising to block. The shock cracked the pavement in a spider web of fissures, but the golden giant held firm. Fingers of ceramite and adamant tightened around the creature's knuckles. Abomination snarled and tried to wrench free. Nothing moved. Tony stared, astonished. He just stopped it. Gaius's voice carried through the night, calm and deep. You are strong. But strength alone is nothing. His grip tightened. The monster howled as bones creaked. With his free hand Gaius drew back and drove a single punch into the creature's chest. The impact echoed like a thunderclap. Abomination's body lifted clear off the street, but Gaius's right hand still locked its fist, yanking it back mid-air. Another punch followed. Then another. Each strike sounded like a pile driver, sending tremors through the ground. Streetlights shattered. Windows burst. The abomination's roars devolved into desperate, guttural grunts. Gaius delivered a final, earth-shattering punch. The force of the blow was so immense that the abomination was sent hurtling through the air. But as it flew off, Gaius's hand remained tightly clenched. Slowly, Gaius opened his clenched fist. What lay within was a grotesque sight, the abomination's hand, a mangled mass of crushed meat and splintered bones. Blood oozed from the ruined appendage, dripping onto the ground below. Without a moment's hesitation, Gaius clenched his hand again, this time at a lightning-fast speed. The force of the motion sent the remnants of blood and flesh flying off his gauntlet, leaving the gauntlet clean of blood and flesh. The monster flew backward, crashing through a townhouse and bringing the roof down in a storm of brick and dust, and the monster abomination didn't get up this time. Tony lowered his arm, realizing he'd been half-raised to fire. It seemed I was not needed anymore then. Chapter 48 Clash of Titans. Harlem still burned. Smoke rolled across the ruined blocks, carrying the sour bite of melted asphalt and the tang of scorched metal. Sirens wailed in the distance, but the streets around 125th were a war zone no rescue team would enter. Cars lay on their sides like kicked toys, windows shattered, alarms wailing and dying in random sequence. Tony Stark crouched behind the dented hood of a delivery van, HUD flickering. The abomination was down, thanks to the golden giant now standing calmly in the center of the street, but that victory hadn't cooled the chaos. His flight stabilizers were gone. For once the genius billionaire couldn't rely on altitude to keep him safe. A fresh roar split the smoke. Soldiers flinched as the Hulk rose from the far side of the rebel pile, eyes glowing like furnace coals. Tracer fire sparked harmlessly off his hide, but it only made him angrier. General Ross barked orders over loudspeakers, his voice cracking with strain. "Contain him! All units, open fire!" Muzzle flashes lit the haze. The first volley hammered into the green giant, rounds whining as they flattened against his skin. Hulk staggered, then bellowed, the sound shaking windows for half a block. His muscles swelled, shoulders bulging wider, veins standing out like ropes. With a single bound he landed among the front line. A Humvee flipped end over end. Soldiers scattered as the street buckled beneath the impact. One backhanded sweep of his arm sent a squad tumbling like leaves in a storm. "Hulk!" Tony shouted through the suit's external speakers. "Buddy, take a breath." The plea vanished under the next roar. Hulk turned, searching for another target. For a heartbeat his gaze swept the wreckage where the abomination had fallen. Nothing there, only smoke and the faint shimmer of heat. Then he saw the other giant. The golden figure stood motionless in the drifting ash. Taller than Hulk even at full size, he held a long, curved weapon at his side. Armor the color of sunlight glowed against the blackened street, unmarred by soot or blood. Blue optics burned steadily behind the helmet's visor. Hulk's lips pulled back from his teeth. "Hulk! Smash!" He charged. The ground trembled with each thunderous step. Concrete cracked like thin ice. Hulk's fist, broad as a truck tire, swung in a blur. The golden warrior tilted his head. The punch grazed off the rim of his helm, a near miss that still sent a gust of air strong enough to rattle loose bricks from a nearby wall. Before Hulk could recover, the giant moved. One armored gauntlet slammed into Hulk's ribs. The impact was like a falling building. Air blasted outward in a sharp shockwave. Hulk skidded backward, tearing twin trenches in the pavement as his heels dug in. He halted with a roar, chest heaving, and grew. Muscles bulged, skin stretching as he gained another foot of height. But the golden warrior was still taller. He advanced without hurry, each step ringing like a hammer on an anvil. Hulk lunged again, both fists raised. The next exchange shattered what remained of the street. Hulk swung wild, punches like wrecking balls. The giant met each strike with perfect economy, a raised forearm here, a sidestep there, a countering elbow that cracked like thunder. Cars flipped from the shockwaves. Windows burst in neighboring buildings. Dust drifted down like grey snow. Tony staggered out from cover, trying to keep them in view. His HUD warned of structural collapse all around, but he couldn't look away. "You've gotta be kidding me," he muttered. "He's winning." The fight dragged block to block, a brutal ballet of raw strength and disciplined precision. Hulk fought with instinct and fury, every movement pure force. The Golden Warrior, Gaius, fought with the patience of centuries. He absorbed blows that would have crushed tanks, redirecting others with small pivots of his massive frame. Each counter-strike landed with surgical accuracy, a hammering knee to the gut, a hook that snapped Hulk's head sideways, a shoulder slam that drove the green giant to one knee. Hulk roared louder, veins standing out like cables, but nothing changed the rhythm. Gaius pressed forward, inexorable. Finally Gaius halted, lowering his arms slightly. Through the smoke his deep voice carried, steady and calm. "You are strength without purpose." Hulk answered with a bellow and charged yet again. Gaius reached across his back. Metal hissed and a long blade slid free. The weapon was no simple sword, its edge shimmered with a pale blue aura that hummed like a live wire. Tony's heart jumped. "Oh no! Oh no no no!" The power sword came alive with a rising whine. One sweep could carve through metal like paper. Tony had seen its capabilities firsthand. It sliced through the Iron Warrior's full metal armor with ease. And against flesh and bone, even Hulk's flesh shouldn't able to stop it. "Bad idea, big guy," Tony muttered, already firing his micromissiles. A scatter of warheads streaked between the two titans, exploding in a curtain of sparks and smoke. Gaius slowed, blade raised. Hulk halted, confused by the sudden firework of light and sound. Tony's helmet retracted with a hiss. "Gaius!" he shouted, voice cracking through the smoke. "Don't kill him. He's one of the good guys." Hulk blinked, eyes flicking between Stark and the golden figure. His massive chest heaved. For a long moment the only sounds were distant sirens and the ticking of cooling metal. "Friend!" Tony called again, desperate. "Friend!" The word seemed to reach through the fury. Hulk's posture eased by degrees. His breathing slowed. He stayed ready, but the blind rage faded from his eyes. All around them, the military regrouped. Engines rumbled as more tanks rolled in. The whoop-whoop of rotor blades cut through the smoke. Spotlights swept the battlefield. General Ross's voice thundered from a loudspeaker. "Stark! Remove your golden armor immediately. That creature is a United States military asset. Stand down or be detained." A ring of soldiers tightened around the three figures. Rifles came up, laser dots dancing across Gaius's chest plate. Helicopters circled, their guns tracking. Gaius did not lower the sword. The standoff stretched. A single nervous soldier stepped too close, weapon trembling. The barrel wavered an inch. Gaius moved faster than thought. His gauntlet flashed outward. The soldier's upper body vanished in a blossom of red mist and shattered bone. The shockwave knocked nearby men to the ground. Shouts erupted. The entire line opened fire. The storm of bullets pinged harmlessly from the golden armor, sparks skittering like rain on a statue. Gaius advanced, unhurried, each step deliberate. His blade stayed raised but untouched, his fists were enough. One backhand caved in a concrete barricade and the soldiers behind it. Another strike sent a Humvee spinning across the street. "Gaius, stop!" Tony ran toward him, armor sputtering. "They're not worth it." A heavy machine gun barked from above. A combat helicopter swept in low, barrels glowing red. Tracers streaked through the smoke. Gaius never flinched. He broke into a sudden sprint, each stride faster than the last, the ground cracking beneath his boots. He vaulted onto the crushed roof of an abandoned taxi, used it like a springboard, and launched skyward in an impossible arc. Metal groaned as his gauntlet clamped onto the helicopter's landing strut. The pilot shouted over the comms, the craft bucking under the sudden weight. With his free hand Gaius seized the fuselage and tore it open like paper. Fuel ignited. The helicopter exploded in a blossom of fire, raining debris across the street. Through the blaze Gaius dropped back to the ground, cloak of flame trailing behind him. He landed with a seismic boom, utterly unscathed. Burning wreckage crashed a moment later. For the first time that night, the soldiers stopped shooting. A deep rumble built overhead. From the smoke descended a sleek black Quinjet, its turbines whining as it settled above the ruined street. A clear, commanding voice boomed from the external speakers. "Stand down, Gaius. This is Director Nick Fury. I'll handle it." The remaining troops hesitated. Engines idled. Fingers eased from triggers. The Quinjet's ramp lowered and a single man strode out, long black coat, eye patch gleaming in the firelight. Nick Fury walked to the center of the devastation until he stood a few paces from the towering warrior. "You've caused a lot of trouble, Gaius," he said, voice even but sharp as a blade. The golden giant regarded him for a heartbeat. Then his helmet unlocked with a hiss and folded back. Firelight reflected off a face carved in calm stone. "I don't care," Gaius said simply. Fury's one eye narrowed, but he said nothing. Inside the Gaius's mind, a quiet chime sounded, something only he could hear. System message. Mission, help Tony Stark. Objective 1, defeat or kill Abomination completed. Objective 2, defeat or kill Hulk completed. Rewards now available. It seem these two green ogren are the Hulk and Abomination, my mission then is completed, Gaius thought. Then another voice filled his head, deeper and older than the stars. The Emperor's voice echoed in his mind. "This Terra holds no trace of the Immaterium, as the Emperor observed, yet I sense weaker and stronger echoes, dark realms, hellish planes, countless other dimensions. And this world is veiled, shielded from them." The message faded, leaving only the crackle of flames and the heavy silence of men who no longer dared to fire. Chapter 49 The Emperor's Will. The Quinjet hummed steadily through the night. Inside, the cabin was quiet except for the soft thrum of engines and the faint hiss of recycled air. Tony Stark sat across from Gaius, his armor's faceplate open. Soot streaked his cheek, and his eyes kept drifting to the giant beside him. Hulk, now Bruce Banner again, lay stretched out on a padded bench. Betty Ross knelt nearby, checking his pulse and brushing damp hair from his forehead. Banner was breathing but still deep in a faint, the strain of his transformation leaving him pale and trembling. Natasha Romanoff and Agent Coulson took seats along the opposite wall. They spoke in low voices, their eyes flicking often toward the golden-armored warrior who sat with his hands resting on his knees. Gaius filled the space even without moving, the soft glow of his armor catching the dim cabin lights. Nick Fury stood near the cockpit door, arms folded. He hadn't spoken since they lifted off. Tony finally broke the silence. So, where exactly are we going, Fury? Fury's one good eye stayed on the view ahead. Back to your place, Stark. SHIELD headquarters is tied up, internal problems. He didn't elaborate, but the tension in his voice said enough. We need somewhere quiet. Tony raised a brow but didn't push. Instead he glanced at Gaius, who hadn't moved since boarding. The giant's helmet rested on the maglock at his back, the golden eagle on his chest shines when the light hits it. A soft chime echoed only in Gaius's mind. System message. Reward unlocked, shared gate. You may now bring others with you when you travel between worlds. Limit, 10 persons for now. The words settled in his thoughts like stone in still water. For now. So the number could grow. He could bring more, someday. Gaius's gaze stayed forward, unreadable behind the burnished gold of his armor. This means I could carry people to other universes. No one else noticed the faint shift in his expression. The Quinjet landed smoothly on the private pad of Tony's Malibu cliffside home. Stark had called ahead, and the sprawling glass house was already lit. The team filed out into the salt-scented night. Inside, Pepper Potts and Happy Hogan were waiting. A long dining table overflowed with delivered food, sandwiches, fruit, trays of warm dishes. Pepper carried a folded set of clothes for Banner, whose breathing had steadied. Here, she whispered to Betty, handing over a soft sweatshirt and pants. For when he wakes. Tony had one more surprise, a reinforced chair built to Gaius's size. Polished steel supports, extra wide seat. Custom job, Tony said as they entered the lounge. Figured if you ever came back, you'd need a place that wouldn't crack in half. Gaius inclined his head in a small gesture of thanks and lowered himself onto it. The chair held without a creak as it was made by Tony personally. Everyone else found seats around the room. For a moment only the sound of the ocean filled the wide glass walls. Tony exhaled and leaned forward, forearms on his knees. Gaius, he said carefully, I know you're not from around here. But maybe try to avoid killing so many next time. The street are painted red by you. Gaius turned his gaze toward him, steady as a mountain. They aimed their weapons at me, he said, voice low but firm. I was merciful that I did not end them all when they threatened me. Tony opened his mouth, then closed it again. He couldn't argue with the cold truth of that. Nick Fury stepped in, voice sharper. Those soldiers couldn't scratch you. Why kill even one? They disrespected the angels of the Emperor, Gaius replied, tone calm but final. Fury's brow tightened. And who is this Emperor you keep talking about? The one you serve? Tony added quickly, careful not to sound mocking. Yet, before you said something about him still living, even if he's gone. What does that mean? All eyes turned to Gaius, Natasha leaning forward slightly, Coulson attentive, Pepper watching from the kitchen. Betty kept her focus on Bruce, but her head tilted, listening. Gaius rose to his full height. The room seemed to shrink around him. He looked at each of them in turn, his deep voice carrying through the quiet. It is the 42nd millennium of my time, he began. The Emperor I serve is the Emperor of mankind. He is master of humanity, ruler of a million worlds by the strength of his armies. Natasha's eyes narrowed slightly, Pepper's hand froze on the coffee pot. He has sat unmoving on the golden throne of Terra, or Earth as its name in ancient times for more than 10,000 years, Gaius continued. To sustain him, 1,000 souls are offered each day. Without this, the light that guides humanity would fade, and the darkness, between the stars would swallow us all. Coulson blinked. 1,000, every day. Tony's brow furrowed, doing the math. That's billions. Over thousands of years. Gaius nodded once. Yet, even in this deathless state, the Emperor's power shields mankind. Great fleets cross a sea of nightmares you cannot imagine. His will lights their way. Vast armies fight in his name. Among them, us the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, stand greatest of all, guardsmen, and etc. He paused, letting the words settle. But for all their number, it is barely enough. Aliens, heretics, and worse press on every side. To live in my time, it is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable. These are the tales of those times. Forget the power of technology and science, for so much has been forgotten, never to be relearned. Forget the promise of progress and understanding, for in the grim dark future there is only war. The room held its breath. Tony finally let out a slow exhale. Like I've said before, Gaius, your world sounds like a living hellhole. No, not like hellhole, it's truly a hellhole. No one disagreed. Carlson's usually calm face was tight with unease. Natasha's eyes flicked toward the dark ocean, as if searching for something far away. Betty kept her hand on Bruce's arm, her expression soft but troubled. Even Fury's usual confidence dimmed for a heartbeat. Nick Fury thought, will this be truly the future of humanity, to truly live these futures? Nick Fury's hand lingered inside his coat, fingers brushing the modified pager as if the familiar shape offered a small measure of comfort. Gaius looked around at them, his voice quieter now. Yet humanity endures. Because it must. No one spoke. The crackle of the fireplace and the gentle wash of waves were the only sounds. Then the moment broke as Pepper entered with a warm smile, carrying a tray of food. "Food's here," she said, her voice bright but gentle. "You all need to eat." Happy followed with extra plates. The scent of roasted meat and bread filled the air. The heavy mood eased, if only a little. Natasha accepted a plate, Carlson poured drinks, and Tony offered Pepper a grateful nod for breaking the awkwardness and the stalemate. Betty tucked a blanket around Bruce and finally joined the table. Gaius sat again in his custom chair, silent, the gold of his armor catching the flicker of firelight. For now, he let the quiet conversation and clink of dishes wash over him. The stars beyond the glass walls seemed very far away. Gaius breathed once, slow and steady, knowing the master of mankind was listening inside him. Chapter 50 The Emperor's Direction. The night air carried the faint scent of salt and seaweed through the half-open glass doors of Tony Stark's Malibu living room. Outside, the Pacific stretched into the darkness, the moonlight laying a silver path across the waves. Inside, the house had settled into a calm that came only after a long day. Plates with half-finished food rested on the low coffee table. A few wine glasses and cups of tea sat among them. The hum of conversation from dinner had faded to a soft hush. Bruce Banner slept on a side couch, a blanket tucked up to his chin. Betty Ross sat nearby, legs curled beneath her, watching over him with quiet patience. Natasha lounged on the arm of a wide chair, eyes half-closed but alert. Carlson sat opposite her, posture neat as always, though even he looked more relaxed than usual. Nick Fury stood by the broad window, the glow of the city far below reflecting in his single eye. His hands were folded behind his back, the picture of control. The agents didn't leave yet as they were waiting for more information from Gaius, since they can't force Gaius to hand over everything he knows, as that would probably end badly for them, and so they were waiting patiently. Gaius sat in a heavy chair that Tony had reinforced earlier in the evening, the metal frame creaking faintly under the giant's weight. The blue and gold of his armor caught the low light in soft gleams, each plate polished but marked by faint scratches from battles far away. His helmet rested against the magnetic plate on his back, leaving his sharp features uncovered. He was perfectly still, a statue brought to life. For a time, the only sounds were the distant waves and the quiet hum of the house. Tony broke the silence first. He leaned back in his chair, swirling the drink in his hand with a faint grin. "So," he said, eyes on Gaius, "you look different. Bigger. Stronger." And he made a vague gesture at the polished and shining golden armor shinier. Gaius turned his head slightly, his deep voice calm. "My Gene father, Primarch Guilliman, took me to meet the Emperor. The Emperor blessed me." Tony blinked, the grin fading a little. "Blessed you?" "Yes," Gaius said, giving a single small nod. "He has strengthened me." The words hung in the air. Natasha tilted her head, curious but silent. Carlson's brow furrowed as if trying to fit the statement into something he understood. Even Fury's steady gaze sharpened. Tony let out a low whistle and set his glass down. "All right, that's something." He didn't press further, but his eyes held a spark of questions he wasn't ready to ask. The moment stretched before Tony shifted in his seat, now turning toward Fury. "Speaking of things we don't understand," he said, voice a touch harder, "when Gaius first showed up, your people opened fire on Gaius, and clearly a planned attack. Did you ever figure out who gave that order?" Fury's jaw tightened. "We did," he said after a pause. "There's another group inside SHIELD. Someone's been running missions I never signed off on. Hidden files. Secret orders. We're still tracking the source." Tony leaned forward, elbows on his knees. An organization inside your organization? That's a bomb waiting to go off. As Tony knows how big the SHIELD organization is. Natasha's eyes narrowed slightly. Coulson exchanged a brief glance with her, both of them understanding too well how dangerous that could be. Fury's face stayed hard, but his voice carried a note of steel. We'll handle it. Quietly and fast. The room settled again into a heavy quiet. Outside, a single wave broke against the cliff with a low crash. Gaius sat motionless. Contemplating to leave this world now, as the mission issued by the Multiversal Chat was done, but he doesn't know about the progress that the Emperor issued, to breath the world untainted by the immaterium. Then, without warning, a change came over him. He straightened, every line of his body suddenly alert. His eyes lost focus, fixed on something far beyond the room. Inside his mind, a soft pressure bloomed, familiar, commanding yet humane, and impossible to ignore. Go to this place, Gaius. The voice was steady and warm, yet carried the weight of a star. It was the Emperor. Images formed behind Gaius's eyes, a faint star map, a direction more than a location. He understood at once where he needed to go, though the name of the place remained unspoken. The pole was clear. It left no room for doubt. Gaius rose to his feet in one smooth motion, the servo motors of his armor giving a soft hiss. Natasha was on her feet in a blink. Coulson's hand slid toward the inside of his jacket. Fury turned from the window. Tony looked up, startled. Big guy? Something wrong? Gaius's gaze remained distant for a moment before he focused on them. His voice, when it came, was calm but firm. I need you to take me to a place. Fury stepped forward, sharp eye narrowing. Where? I will know the way, Gaius said. Tony set his glass aside and stood. Hold on. What's going on? Gaius turned toward him. The Emperor sent me a mission. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Natasha raised an eyebrow. Coulson's frown deepened. Betty looked up from Bruce, surprise flashing across her face. Tony blinks, trying to process. Your Emperor sent you a mission. As Tony knows, the Emperor shouldn't be able to do that, as the Emperor of mankind is at Gaius's universe, the Emperor shouldn't be able to do that. Fury studied Gaius for a long, silent moment. You're telling me the Emperor gave you orders? Now? Yes, Gaius said simply. The Emperor ordered me now, to go to a location. Tony rubbed his forehead and let out a breath. All right. If you say we need to go somewhere, we'll figure it out. But you're going to have to give us a heading. GPS, coordinates, something. Gaius closed his eyes briefly, feeling the star-bright pole settle into a single, clear direction inside him. I know the way, he said. Fury didn't look convinced, but he nodded once. We move at first light, he decided. Gaius inclined his head in agreement. That is enough. The tension in the room eased slightly, though a quiet unease lingered. Natasha lowered her arms but kept her stance ready. Coulson slowly relaxed his shoulders. Betty shifted closer to Bruce, brushing a hand over his hair. Tony picked up his glass again, but the earlier grin was gone. He glanced at Gaius, then at Fury. Looks like tomorrow just got interesting. No one disagreed. Chapter 51 The Emperor's Path. The night had settled heavy over the cliffside house, waves breaking softly against the rocks far below. Inside, the earlier tension had not quite faded. Gaius still sat in the reinforced chair Tony had arranged for him, his massive frame outlined by the faint glow of the lights. His armor gleamed in places, blue and gold catching the dim reflections. The giant looked as if he belonged to another age, yet here he was, silent in the center of Stark's modern home. Director Fury, Natasha, and Coulson finally rose from their seats. They exchanged a last look at Gaius before turning toward the door. We'll be back at first light, Fury said, his tone even but carrying weight. Rest while you can. Tomorrow we move. Tony gave a half salute with the glass in his hand. Try not to crash any more parties on the way out. Natasha gave a faint smile at that, while Coulson's polite nod served as their quiet farewell. The agents disappeared into the cool night, the sound of the closing door leaving behind a deep stillness. For a time, no one spoke. The house was calm, the only sound the faint hum of machines deeper inside. Betty sat close to Bruce's still form, her hand resting lightly on his arm, as if willing him to wake. Tony leaned back on the sofa, his eyes flicking toward the armored figure across the room. You ever going to take that armor off? Tony asked at last. His voice was light, though his eyes were curious, as this is a new armor compared from the first one, and its material are unknown to him since gold can't be that hard and durable, so it shouldn't be gold, so he is curious. Can't be too comfortable. You must feel like a walking tank 24/7. Gaius slowly turned his head, his expression unreadable but calm. He shook his head once. There may be a fight tomorrow. I would rather not make a hassle of removing and putting it back on. Tony tilted his head. Why would there be a fight? We're just going to a place your emperor asked for, right? The emperor does not send me to ordinary places, Gaius said. His voice carried no threat, only simple certainty. Tony studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. Fair point. He pushed himself to his feet, stretching his back with a groan. Well, whatever's waiting for us tomorrow, I'll be more useful after a few hours of sleep. He started toward the hallway, pausing only to glance back once more. Gaius hadn't moved. Don't stay up all night staring at the walls, big guy, Tony muttered with a faint grin before disappearing toward his room. Gaius did not answer. Instead, he rose and walked with slow steps to the room he had used before, the simple space Stark had given him when he first arrived. He did not ask the Emperor what tomorrow would bring. He knew the answer would reveal itself soon enough. The first light of dawn touched the glass walls of Stark's home, filling the rooms with a pale glow. Gaius stirred at once, rising with the kind of discipline that never faded, no matter the world. The house was quiet but alive, machines humming, the faint clink of tools, and the sound of a man at work. When Gaius stepped into the living room, he found Tony bent over a workbench. The man's hands moved quickly, adjusting clamps and wires on a new suit of armor. It was sleek, smoother than his earlier models, with red and gold plating catching the morning light. Mark 6, Tony said without looking up, sensing the giant's gaze. Been sitting half-finished for a while. Thought I'd get her running since the last few got wrecked. Gaius watched in silence as Tony tightened a final piece into place. The arc reactor on his chest glowed, steady and strong. Turning from the sight, Gaius moved toward the dining table. A full spread of food waited there, bread, fruit, eggs, and meat, enough for a giant like him. Pepper entered at that moment, balancing a tray with mugs of coffee. One was comically large, closer to a bucket with a handle. She carried it to Gaius with a faint smile. This one's yours, she said simply. Gaius inclined his head. My thanks. She nodded and turned to hand a normal-sized cup to Tony, who accepted it gratefully. You're a lifesaver, Pep, Tony said, taking a long sip before returning to his adjustments. For a few minutes, the house felt almost normal. Gaius ate in steady silence, the sounds of cutlery soft against the large plate. Pepper busied herself near the counter, and Tony kept working at the armor with renewed focus. Sir, J.A.R.V.I.SS voice broke the calm, polite as ever. Director Fury, Agent Romanoff, and Agent Coulson are at the door. Let them in, Tony said without hesitation, not lifting his head from his work. The front door opened, and the three agents stepped inside. Natasha offered Pepper a polite greeting, her sharp eyes drifting toward the dining table. Coulson gave a short nod of respect, his gaze landing on Gaius, who continued eating without hurry. Fury walked in last, as composed as ever, his attention fixed firmly on the armored giant. Natasha helped herself casually to a seat, while Coulson accepted a plate Pepper offered, thanking her politely. Fury, however, remained standing, hands clasped behind his back as he waited. When Gaius finally set down his fork and picked up the oversized napkin, soft like a towel in his massive hand, the room quieted. He wiped his mouth with deliberate care, then rose smoothly to his full height. Are you ready to go, Gaius? Fury asked, his tone leaving no room for misunderstanding. Gaius met his gaze, gave a single nod, and replied, yes. Tony closed the chest plate of his new suit, the locking mechanism snapping into place with a hiss of servos. The glowing reactor lit the gold and red plating with renewed power. Then let's get this road trip started, he said, stepping forward. The Quinjet waited on the lawn, sleek and ready. The group boarded quickly, Gaius towering in the cabin, Tony armored at his side, Fury at the controls with Natasha and Coulson seated behind. Once airborne, the cityscape stretched out beneath them. Gaius stood near the cockpit, raising one gauntlet hand to point ahead, his voice calm. This way. Fury glanced at the instruments, his eyebrow arching. New York. Gaius did not answer. He simply kept his hand raised, guiding them with silent certainty. The flight was long but uneventful, tension simmering in the silence. Natasha's sharp eyes shifted often to Gaius, as if studying a puzzle she couldn't solve. Carlson made notes quietly on a tablet. Tony leaned against the cabin wall, arms folded, letting his new armor settle around him. Fury focused on the controls, though his gaze flicked often to the giant behind him. Finally, the Quinjet dipped lower, sliding into a holding pattern above Manhattan. There, Gaius said at last, pointing toward a quiet street. Fury guided the jet down, setting it neatly on a rooftop before they disembarked. They walked down to street level. Before them stood an ordinary brownstone, small and plain among the taller buildings. Carlson glanced at the address and read aloud, 177A Bleecker Street. Greenwich Village. To the agents in Stark, it was just another Manhattan building. But Gaius saw through the veil. The power woven around the place was clear as day to him, a faint shimmer against the Emperor's pull. He strode forward, his bulk dwarfing the simple door. Before he could knock, the door swung open on its own. The frame stretched impossibly wide, bending reality so that even his massive frame could pass without effort. The others froze in shock. Natasha's brows lifted slightly, Carlson's mouth tightened in surprise, and Tony muttered, "Well, that's new." The interior was vast, far larger than the outside suggested. Strange relics lined the walls, faint golden light spilling from runes etched in the wood and stone. A man waited there, tall, dark-skinned, clad in yellow robes. His presence was calm, his tone steady as he spoke. "I am Drum, protector of the New York Sanctum. The Sorcerer Supreme has been expecting you." With a practiced wave of his hand, golden sparks flared into a spinning circle of light. The air shimmered, and within seconds, a towering portal opened before them. The group stared. Natasha's eyes narrowed, studying the energy. Carlson shifted uneasily. Tony leaned forward, fascinated despite himself. Fury, for once, lost his composure and muttered, "What the hell?" Inside Gaius, the direction of the Emperor's command shifted again. The pole pointed clearly toward the portal. He understood. Without a word, he stepped forward. The others hesitated only a moment before following. They emerged into a grand temple. The air was thick with calm energy, the walls glowing faintly with shifting patterns. At the center sat a figure, bald, serene, her robe simple yet regal. The Ancient One opened her eyes as they entered. Her gaze moved first to Gaius, then lingered on him with quiet recognition. "I was expecting you, Gaius," she said, her voice calm but certain. "And the Emperor of Mankind." The words hit the room like a stone in still water. Fury's one eye widened slightly. Natasha drew in a quiet breath. Carlson's hand froze mid-motion, as if caught in thought. Tony muttered under his breath, "Emperor of what now?" Chapter 52 The Emperor Revealed. The Ancient One's calm words lingered in the chamber, still hanging heavy in the air. "I was expecting you, Gaius. And the Emperor of Mankind." The room fell silent. Even Fury, who rarely showed surprise, raised an eyebrow. Natasha's sharp eyes flicked between Gaius and the bald woman in the simple robes. Carlson's pen froze above his tablet. Only Tony leaned back on his heel with a faint smirk, muttering, "Emperor of what now?" The Ancient One's gaze swept across the group. She let the silence stretch a moment longer before speaking again, her voice soft but clear. "And Tony Stark, Director Nick Fury, Agent Phil Carlson, and Natasha Romanoff." That simple statement made everyone's eyes widen, except Tony's. He already knew he was famous. Carlson looked shocked, Fury stiffened, and even Natasha's calm mask cracked for a heartbeat. None of them expected their names to be spoken so casually in this strange, mystical place, as they were agents. But the weight of the Ancient One's first words still hung over them. Emperor of Mankind. What did that mean? The Ancient One's eyes returned to Gaius. She lifted a hand gracefully toward the space before her. "Sit, Gaius. You are my guest here." A massive wooden chair slid forward across the floor as if moved by unseen hands. A low table appeared as well, and with another wave, a steaming pot of tea and several cups floated gently into place. She poured one cup and slid it toward the giant. "Tea." Gaius looked down at the small cup, then back at her. His deep voice was steady. "I don't like tea. I prefer coffee." The Ancient One tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. I see. She let the teapot drift back into her hand, then with a flick of her fingers, the pot dissolved into glowing sparks. The sparks reformed into a massive mug, large enough to fit comfortably in Gaius's hand. Dark liquid poured into it endlessly, filling to the brim. She set it before him with the faintest smile. Infinite coffee. Gaius blinked once, then reached out. He lifted the mug and drank deeply, tilting it back. The rich liquid poured into him for a long 30 seconds straight, yet the coffee never ran out. Finally, he lowered it and studied the still full mug with quiet surprise. He placed it on the table, then lowered himself onto the wooden chair. The furniture creaked but held. Before anyone else could speak, the Ancient One looked directly at Gaius again. Her words were calm, but they struck like a bell. Why don't you come out? Emperor of Mankind. Everyone stiffened. Even Tony's grin faded. Natasha and Carlson stood straighter, their instincts screaming. Fury tensed as if expecting a fight. And then it happened. A glow began to build around Gaius, golden light shining through the seams of his armor. It grew brighter and brighter until it spilled into the room like the dawn. The light burst forward, shaping itself into a towering figure. He appeared in full, taller even than Gaius, clad in radiant golden armor. A massive sword rested in one hand, and a clawed gauntlet gleamed on the other. The Emperor of Mankind stood before them, shining like a living sun. Everyone stared in awe. Without hesitation, Gaius dropped to one knee. His head bowed, not out of fear, but out of respect. This was his emperor, the one who had carried the weight of humanity even in death and fight against chaos even in his state. The others didn't know what to do. Should they kneel? Should they stand their ground? They glanced at each other, awkward, unsure. In the end, they stayed standing, frozen in place. The Ancient One remained calm. She didn't move, didn't show fear. Only the eye of Agamotto at her chest glowed faintly with green light. For a long moment, the chamber held its breath. As if they had done their talk privately that others can't hear, then, slowly, the Emperor's massive weapons dissolved into golden particles, vanishing into the air. He stood unarmed. He stepped past Gaius and seated himself in the same chair his son had just used, his golden presence filling the room. The Ancient One raised her tea, sipping slowly. She studied the being across from her. I have seen the future. Your influence here. And especially the influence of your son. She nodded toward Gaius, still kneeling. He is a thread woven tightly into this world. The Emperor's deep voice rolled through the chamber, calm but absolute. Gaius is indeed special. I have observed him for a long time. Gaius lowered his head further, silent. The others shifted uneasily. Carlson's knuckles tightened around his tablet. Natasha's sharp eyes flicked between the two figures. Fury crossed his arms, though the set of his jaw gave away his unease. Tony only muttered, yet, no pressure, under his breath. The Emperor's gaze swept the room before returning to the Ancient One. I can feel the same echoes of the warp in this world. There are many, most weaker. But some, stronger than the warp itself. The Ancient One nodded once. Indeed. This world has many dimensions. The Dark Dimension, the Hell Dimension, and countless smaller realms. Some hunger for this world. That is why we shield it. The Emperor inclined his head slightly. I see. I sense the shield. It is strong, woven from mystic threads unlike the warp. That is why I came, to understand it. No one else dared speak. Fury, Natasha, and Carlson felt like children listening at a door they weren't supposed to open. Even Tony, curious as ever, stayed quiet. The Ancient One only sipped her tea calmly. I know. The Emperor rose to his full height. His golden presence seemed even larger now. Then I have completed my task. I have seen how this world protects itself from the endless dark. I will return, and I will try to build the same protection for Terra and many worlds. He turned, stepping toward Gaius. The giant still knelt, unmoving. Rise, son of Gil-Iman. Gaius rose to his feet, looking up into the Emperor's glowing face. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the Emperor's golden body began to break apart, his form dissolving into radiant particles. They swirled upward into the air, gathering together into a miniature sun that hovered between them. It glowed brilliantly but gave off no heat. Slowly, the sun drifted toward Gaius and sank into his chest. The light faded, leaving him standing alone once more. The room fell utterly silent. Fury's hands tightened behind his back, his one eye fixed on Gaius. Natasha's sharp gaze lingered on him as if searching for answers. Coulson swallowed quietly, his mind racing to record what he had just seen. Tony raised his eyebrows and muttered, "Well, that was something." The Ancient One set down her empty cup, calm as ever. She simply said, "It seems your Emperor trusts you greatly, Gaius. And now, so must we. Especially you will greatly change the fate of this universe and many others." But she didn't said the last sentence as she kept that to herself. Chapter 53 Mexico? The chamber at Camartage grew quiet again. The faint echo of the Emperor's voice faded, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the smell of incense. Gaius sat still, his posture straight and unyielding. Across from him, the Ancient One calmly sipped her tea. Her presence seemed unchanged, as if nothing extraordinary had just taken place, though Gaius felt the Emperor's essence still stirring within him. He wondered, now that the task was complete, should he return to his own universe? The mission that the Multiversal Chat and the Emperor issued are now completed. His thoughts had barely formed when her voice broke the silence. "If I may say, Gaius." She spoke with her usual calm, her eyes steady, "You should not return to your universe just yet. There is an event that will take place in Mexico." Gaius turned toward her, surprised. For a moment, he wondered if she had read his mind. The idea unsettled him more than he cared to admit. The Ancient One gave a faint smile. "No, I cannot read your mind, Gaius. But I have seen what your actions may shape in the future." Her words carried no force, no pressure, yet they held weight. He knew she spoke truth, or at least a version of it. He gave a short, solemn nod. The Emperor's voice inside him had gone quiet, offering no counsel. For now, it seemed, his path lay here. The Ancient One set her cup down. "Our business here is finished." She rose to her feet and with a graceful motion drew a circle through the air. Sparks flared, swirling into a glowing portal. Beyond it lay the familiar sight of Stark's modern home. "You may stay here for reflection, or return," she said, her tone gentle but final. Gaius rose first. His heavy steps carried him to the edge of the portal. Without a word, he passed through, disappearing in the golden light and followed by Tony Stark. Coulson followed with a cautious glance back at the Ancient One. Natasha, as calm as ever, slipped through behind him. Fury lingered the longest, his one eye locked on the sorcerer. Then, with a low exhale, he stepped through. The portal closed with a faint hiss, leaving only the faint scent of ozone. On the other side, Fury finally let out the breath he had been holding. "What the F***ck was that?" Coulson gave a dry chuckle. "It seems we may have wizards in our world, sir." Natasha folded her arms, her tone cool. "Future soldiers, an emperor of mankind, and now wizards. It's getting crowded." Fury scowled but didn't answer. Tony was waiting when they returned, leaning casually against the bar with a glass in his hand. He smirked when his gaze landed on Gaius. "Guess my world isn't so ordinary after all." Gaius looked at him, his voice steady. "It is indeed not very ordinary." The humor faded from Tony's face when Fury stepped forward. His attention fixed on Gaius. "What do you think that wizard meant about an event in Mexico?" Fury asked bluntly. Gaius shook his head. "I don't know." That answer didn't sit well with Fury, but he gave a small nod. "Then we'll have to prepare." Bruce Banner had stirred awake not long ago and was now sitting at the dining table with Betty Ross, a plate of food in front of him. His expression was tired but calmer than before. Fury paused to check in. "You good, Doctor?" Bruce nodded slowly. "As good as I can be." Betty gave Fury a polite smile. "Thank you." Fury gave the smallest of nods. "Take care of him." With that, he motioned to Coulson, who gathered his things and headed toward the door. Natasha followed, her movements smooth and unhurried. She glanced back at Gaius once before slipping outside. Bruce and Betty left with them, heading toward a waiting car. The house quieted again. Only Gaius and Tony remained in the living room. The hum of hidden machinery filled the silence. Tony set down his glass. "Looks like you'll be sticking around for a while." He eyed the armored giant in front of him. "Want to get out of that walking tank? I've got a setup that'll strip the armor clean in minutes." Gaius hesitated, looked around and felt the Emperor presence inside him. He gave a slow nod. Tony grinned. "Follow me." Tony led him into the workshop. At the center of the room stood a circular platform ringed with robotic arms and scanners. The lights overhead glowed bright as Tony tapped a console. "Step up," he said. Gaius obeyed, the platform groaning under his weight. With a whir, the arms came to life. They latched onto the sockets of his armor. Piece by piece, the war plate was disassembled. The massive golden ormite pauldrons lifted away first, followed by the chest plate splitting open with a hiss. Greaves were detached, gauntlets unlatched, the gorget loosened. Each section clattered onto nearby racks. Beneath the armor was the undersuit, tied across a frame far beyond human. As the last layer peeled away, Gaius stood revealed. His skin was scarred and ridged with dark lines of the black carapace, the implant that linked him to his armor. Muscles corded like steel shifted beneath his skin, and sockets studded his body like ports for machinery. Tony stared openly, his usual jokes lost for a moment seeing the ports in his body. "You're built like a fortress," he muttered. "No wonder the armor doesn't slow you down." Fortunately, Tony had anticipated this. He walked over to a nearby table where folded clothes waited, massive by any normal standard. "Had these made after I scanned your armor the other day," Tony said. "Custom job. Figured you'd need something that doesn't scream invader from the future." He handed over a thick hoodie, reinforced cargo pants, and scaled boots. Gaius slipped them on, the clothes fitting surprisingly well though they strained against his broad frame. The casual outfit was a sharp contrast to his usual warlike image. Tony shook his head, muttering, "Still looks like a tank, but now he's a tank in streetwear." Later, Gaius sat in the living room again, now in a chair Tony had reinforced earlier to hold his weight. His size made the furniture look small regardless. A soft voice came from the speakers. "Would you like food, Master Gaius? Or perhaps coffee? I can also display the news," Jarvis offered politely. "Food," Gaius said. He thought for a moment. "And the news?" "At once." Moments later, Pepper was notified of his order, while the television flickered to life. News anchors filled the screen, reporting on global events both great and trivial, conflicts across the seas, political debates, celebrity scandals. Gaius sat in silence, a heavy mug of coffee in one hand, watching the screen as if it were another battlefield. His thoughts drifted to what the Ancient One said. Mexico. An event yet to unfold. He did not know what awaited, but whatever it was, he would be ready. The house was quiet except for the low hum of machines and the steady voice of the newscaster. Somewhere deep inside, the Emperor's presence stirred faintly, as if watching alongside him. The day moved on. Chapter 54 The Hammer in the Desert. Days had passed since the meeting with the Ancient One. Life inside Stark's mansion had settled into a quiet rhythm. This peaceful life and silence is what would be the dream of his gene father Guilliman, but in his world that can't be done. The silence was broken only by the faint hum of machines and the low voice of Tony talking to Jarvis somewhere in the workshop. He spent most of his days observing. Sometimes watching the news, sometimes studying Tony's designs with quiet interest. His presence had become normal enough that the agents who came to monitor him no longer flinched every time he turned. Carlson, Natasha, and even a few others rotated in and out, keeping an eye on things and checking in for updates. Despite their quiet curiosity, Gaius never showed annoyance, or any emotion at all beyond his usual calm and stern demeanor, leaving them unsure whether they were bothering him or not. Tony, on the other hand, made it his mission to draw him out. He would talk during meals, during repairs, during anything really. "So," Tony had said one morning, "where you're from, people actually pray to your boss the Emperor, right? Sounds exhausting." Gaius only replied, "Faith sustains men through darkness." Tony blinked. "Right. Noted. No darkness here, just coffee and sarcasm." It was like that for days, quiet conversation, soft machine hums, and a tension underneath it all, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Around noon one day, Gaius and Tony were having lunch in the dining room when Carlson arrived. The agent greeted them politely, as always, then sat down with a plate Pepper had ordered for him earlier. The atmosphere was calm, Jarvis played quiet music in the background, and sunlight spilled across the table. Tony was halfway through a story about his armor designs when Carlson's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and answered immediately. "Yes. Yes, I'm listening," he said, his calm voice slightly tenser than usual. "Understood. Keep the area sealed off. He hung up and turned toward the two men at the table. Tony raised an eyebrow. That didn't sound like a lunch call. Carlson gave a small nod. We found something. A hammer, buried in the desert near a small town in Mexico. Tony blinked. A hammer? Yes, Carlson said. After what the sorcerer mentioned, the event that will happen in Mexico, we set up constant monitoring on Mexico. 2 hours ago, sensors picked up an unusual energy surge. A team went to check and found this hammer. It's embedded in the ground. No one can move it, so we had the area secured and set up a facility first. Tony leaned back, curious now. Can't be moved? Sounds like a challenge. Let me guess, half your agents already tried pulling it out. Carlson gave a dry look. You're not wrong, and we also have tried using machines to move it, but it just cannot be moved. Across the table, Gaius set down his fork quietly. He took a napkin and wiped his mouth, his movements precise, disciplined. Then he stood up. Then we will go there, he said calmly. Tony blinked, then smirked. You make it sound like we're going for a picnic. But there was something in Gaius's tone, steady, certain, that made both men understand he wasn't suggesting. He was deciding. Without another word, Gaius walked toward the workshop. Inside, the air shifted with the familiar hum of Stark's machines. The armor platform waited, surrounded by rows of robotic arms. Gaius removed his shirt and pants, folding them neatly aside, leaving only the close-fitting shorts he wore underneath. His voice carried clearly through the room. Begin armor assembly, JARVIS. At once, Sir Gaius. The mechanical arms came alive, moving with smooth precision. They lifted the black undersuit first, freshly cleaned and repaired. The flexible plates wrapped around his body like a second skin, locking perfectly to the dark ports embedded along his torso. Next came the armor. The greaves locked around his legs with solid clacks. The chest plate split and sealed with a hiss, followed by the pauldrons, vambraces, and gauntlets. Each piece settled into place with mechanical certainty, gold reflecting the workshop lights. Tony and Carlson stood nearby, silently watching. The air grew heavier, charged with a feeling none of them could quite explain. Finally, a mechanical arm handed Gaius his helmet. He took it with a steady hand and placed it over his head. The seals locked with a faint hiss. The eyes lit up softly, blue light glowing from within. He turned toward Carlson. Prepare transport. We leave now. Carlson, caught off guard for a second, nodded quickly. Right. I'll call the Quinjet. He pulled out his phone and issued the order, then glanced at Tony. You coming with us? Tony grinned. You even need to ask. Moments later, Tony stepped onto his own platform. The Iron Man armor Mark 6 assembled around him piece by piece, matching the rhythm of Gaius's earlier sequence. Carlson only muttered under his breath, I'm surrounded by two armored, one giant and one normal height. The Quinjet arrived minutes later, its engines kicking up dust as it landed on the helipad. Natasha was at the controls, her calm expression unchanged when she saw who she'd be flying with. Carlson boarded first, followed by Gaius, who had to duck slightly to fit through the hatch. Tony hovered beside the jet in his armor, staying airborne until everyone was inside. The flight was long but quiet. Below them stretched endless desert, wind, and sand rolling under the sun. Tony broke the silence. So, mysterious hammer that nobody can lift. Place your bets, guys. Alien tech? Ancient artifact? Carlson sighed. Let's just hope it's not dangerous. Gaius didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. Well, whatever it was, Gaius is ready for it. When they landed, the desert heat hit immediately. The site was surrounded by fencing, trucks, tents, and floodlights. Agents moved everywhere, securing equipment and maintaining the perimeter. Clint Barton was on the ground, overseeing the operation. He turned when he saw the Quinjet touch down, saluting casually when Carlson stepped out, nodding at Natasha when she came out, and nodding at Tony as well. Then Gaius emerged. The golden giant stepped down slowly, the sun gleaming off his armor. Every motion was measured, every step solid. Even among trained agents, silence fell. Clint froze for a second, even though he'd read the reports about Gaius, as Nick Fury gave information about him. Seeing Gaius in person was something else entirely, more statue than man, radiating command and weight. A few new recruits instinctively raised their rifles, unsure what to make of him. Lower your weapons! Clint shouted instantly. That's an ally, not a target. The soldiers obeyed quickly. As said, Clint read information about Gaius, and know the danger with it as well. Clint walked up to them, trying to keep his tone steady. Agent Barton. I was told to expect you, Coulson, Natasha, Stark, and... His eyes lifted slightly. Gaius. Gaius inclined his head once. Bring me to the hammer. Right this way, Clint said, turning. They moved across the sandy ground toward a metal enclosure built around the discovery site. When they reached the entrance, Clint stopped, the door was too short. He blinked, looking at Gaius's towering frame. Ah, this might be a problem. Tony laughed softly. You really didn't think about door size, hey? Gaius said nothing. He simply turned toward the side of the enclosure, gripped the metal wall, and tore it open as if it were paper. The sound of ripping steel echoed across the camp. Dust scattered. Every nearby guard froze in alarm until Clint quickly raised his radio. All units, stand down. He's with us. Tony was still laughing quietly. You should have taken account for Gaius' size. Clint just ignored him. Inside, at the center of the chamber, rested the hammer. It wasn't large, roughly the size of a sledgehammer. The head was square, engraved with delicate knotwork and runes. The handle was wrapped in brown leather, ending in a looped strap. It sat embedded in the ground, untouched yet radiating a strange presence. Gaius approached slowly. The air around it felt charged, humming faintly, alive. His strength and will senses an energy unlike anything from his universe, not warp energy, not psychic power, but something deeper and purer. This weapon carries a will, he said quietly. Tony scanned it from a distance, readings flashing across his visor. Whatever it's made of, it's rejecting every kind of analysis. Like it's choosing not to be read. Gaius reached out, then suddenly stopped. He turned his head slightly, as if hearing something. Without warning, he pivoted and threw a single punch into the empty air beside him. The force cracked like thunder. Something invisible slammed against the wall with a loud crash, flickering into view, a figure in green and gold armor, gasping from the blow. The man landed hard, the illusion vanishing to reveal his true form. Loki! The agents shouted, raising their weapons, but stayed frozen when they realized who they were looking at. Loki stood slowly, brushing off dust, his eyes narrowing at the golden giant before him. Who are you? He demanded sharply. Why do you interfere in Asgard's affairs? Loki thought it was another pantheon, or it might even be the Olympians. Gaius ignored his question. He simply stood tall, helm glowing faintly, the desert light catching the golden edges of his armor. Chapter 55 The Trickster and the Warrior. The desert was still. The sun beat down on the fenced research site, glinting off trucks, metal, and the strange hammer embedded in the sand. Gaius stood unmoving, gold armor gleaming under the light, while Tony and Coulson watched from a few steps behind. Around them, SHIELD agents held their positions, uncertain but ready. Loki's green and gold figure stood across from Gaius, faint heat rippling between them. He adjusted his cloak, his sharp features unreadable as his eyes studied the giant before him. You dare interfere in Asgard's affairs? He said, his voice smooth but layered with disdain. Tony raised his palm, his repulsor already glowing. Asgard? As in the mythological Asgard? He said, half incredulous, half curious. Loki didn't even look at him. His gaze stayed fixed on Gaius. What pantheon are you from, to meddle in the business of gods? Tony blinked. Okay, rude, he muttered. Do I have a sign that says ignore me? When Loki made no effort to respond, Tony sighed, aimed, and fired a low-powered repulsor shot, more to prove a point than anything else. The beam shot through Loki's body without resistance. His form flickered, dissolving into a shimmer of green mist. The agents murmured, confused. Coulson frowned. It was an illusion. Gaius didn't move at first, but his helm tilted slightly. His senses reached out beyond what eyes could see. He could feel it, a faint disturbance in the air, like pressure behind glass. Without a word, he turned and walked several paces to the side. Tony followed slowly, visor scanning for signals. Gaius? You finding something? The golden warrior stopped, his body still. Then, in one sudden motion, he drove his fist forward. The sound cracked like thunder. The air itself seemed to distort, and out of nowhere, a figure appeared, Loki's true form, barely dodging as the blow grazed his shoulder. His illusion vanished completely, leaving the trickster panting and glaring. "You can sense me," Loki said, surprise flickering through his anger. "Xenos," Gaius murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "Not God. Not man." Loki's expression darkened. "You dare strike at a prince of Asgard?" His pride flared, anger boiling to the surface. He raised his spear, Gungnir, and energy began to gather at its tip. Gaius didn't respond. He simply moved. His next punch came faster, the impact echoing across the camp. Loki barely had time to brace before the strike caught his chest, launching him backward through the temporary enclosure. The metal walls bent inward, sand spraying into the air. Agents shouted, rifles raising instinctively. "Hold your fire!" Coulson's voice cut through the noise. "Everyone stand down!" Through the settling dust, Gaius emerged from the torn wall, his steps heavy but calm. Each movement radiated weight and purpose. Loki struggled to his feet on the other side, brushing sand from his armor, fury twisting his face. "You think brute strength makes you mighty?" Loki hissed. He thrust Gungnir forward, firing a blinding bolt of blue-white energy. It hit Gaius square in the chest, exploding in a burst of light. The shockwave rippled through the sand, but Gaius didn't fall. Smoke drifted from his armor, glowing faintly where the beam had struck. He simply kept walking. Loki fired again, then again. Each blast struck with enough force to destroy a tank, but the Golden Warrior pressed forward, unwavering. His boots left deep imprints in the sand. "You speak too much," he said evenly. Loki's eyes flickered, panic breaking through his composure. He sent one last illusion forward, making it look like he was still attacking from the front, while his true self slipped away to the side. But Gaius sensed it. His head turned sharply, tracking the real presence like a predator. Without hesitation, he pivoted and punched to his right. The impact connected with sickening force. Loki gasped, ribs cracking audibly as he was thrown several meters, tumbling across the sand. He rolled to a stop and clutched his side, grimacing in pain. You will regret this." Loki spat, his voice trembling with fury and disbelief. "You lower god! You dare strike a son of Odin!" Gaius didn't react. His visor pulsed faintly as he advanced again. The air shimmered around Loki as the trickster readied another strike, the Gungnir humming with power. He fired, the beam lanced forward, cutting through dust and wind, but Gaius didn't flinch. The shot exploded harmlessly against his armor. Loki's anger turned to alarm. He backed away quickly, realizing that nothing he threw mattered. The Golden Warrior reached for the sword on his back, drawing it in one smooth motion. The weapon thrummed with energy, glowing faintly with restrained power. Loki's eyes widened. He turned his gaze skyward. "You will regret crossing Asgard," he said, voice rising with fury and fear. "I'll see you again, lower god." A ring of light erupted beneath him, pure color, spinning and expanding until the air itself bent. Gaius lunged forward, sword raised high. But before the blade could fall, the rainbow beam of the Bifrost consumed Loki, and in an instant, he was gone. The light vanished. The sand settled. In its place was only a faint circular mark, shimmering with rainbow hues before fading into dust. Gaius stood still for a long moment. Then, slowly, he sheathed his sword and looked at the empty space. "He fled," he said quietly. Tony landed beside him, scanning the area with his visor. "No heat signature, no energy trace. Okay, what the hell was that about?" Coulson approached, kneeling beside the circular mark. He took a photo with his phone, analyzing the faint radiation. "This isn't anything we've seen before. It's not from Earth." Natasha and Clint joined them from the perimeter, weapons lowered but still alert. Clint raised an eyebrow. "That guy called him a god. Should we be worried about that?" Tony gave a small laugh. "At this point, I'm just rolling with it. Gods, aliens, whatever, Tuesday, right?" Coulson sighed. "Let's just make sure we secure the site. Fury's going to want a report." The tension began to fade. The agents dispersed to re-establish perimeter control, and the group moved back toward the hammer enclosure. The strange weapon still sat there, silent and unmoving. Gaius stood before it once more. He could feel the energy radiating from it, ancient, foreign, and alive. Tony crouched beside it, running another scan. The display flickered with static before he shutting it off entirely. This hammer can't be analyzed. After a moment of silence, Tony stood and turned to Gaius. You know what? We've had a long day. How about we grab something to eat? I am not hungry, Gaius said, though his tone carried no rejection, merely fact. Yet, well, Tony said, I do. Come on, you'll like it. Probably. A beam of rainbow light struck the marble floor of the Bifrost chamber, and Loki appeared, stumbling and gasping. His armor was scorched, one hand clutched his ribs. For a moment, he knelt, his breath sharp with pain. That bastard, he whispered, eyes filled with anger. He struck me, like I was nothing. He stood slowly and walked down the gleaming halls toward the treasure room. His expression hardened with every step. Inside, the destroyer armor stood silent, its metal frame imposing and lifeless. Loki extended a hand. The scepter in his grasp pulsed faintly, sending a ripple of energy through the room. The destroyer's eyes flickered, a dim orange glow. Awaken, Loki commanded softly. The armor shifted, its limbs creaking like ancient stone. But its movement was clumsy, uncertain. Loki frowned, his control still weak. You resist me, but that will change. Soon, you will obey. The armor fell still again. Loki exhaled slowly, regaining his composure. He believes he can strike at the Prince of Asgard and live. His voice lowered to a dangerous whisper. I will show him what divine wrath truly means. The Quinjet descended toward a small desert town, kicking up sand and dust as it landed near the outskirts. Curious locals peeked out from doorways, shielding their eyes against the wind. When the hatch opened, Iron Man stepped out first, servos whirring. A small crowd formed instantly, murmuring in excitement. It's Iron Man! Then, Gaius followed, tall, golden, silent and awe-inspiring. The voices hushed at once. Whispers passed through the crowd. Some thought it was a new Iron Man suit, others a secret government weapon. Tony smirked under his helmet. You're stealing my spotlight, big guy. Gaius didn't say anything but followed Tony. Tony said with a grin. Come on, I know a diner nearby. Well, Tony didn't know it, but his visor sure do. Together, they walked toward the small main street, Coulson and Natasha following behind. The sun hung low over the desert horizon, painting the sky in gold and red. Chapter 56 The Thunder in Exile. The evening sun hung low over the desert horizon, spilling orange light across the small New Mexico town. Wind carried a thin veil of sand through the streets, brushing against weathered signs and cracked windows. The Quinjet's engines had long since faded, leaving behind only the hum of the settling heat. Tony and Gaius walked side by side down the quiet main street. Tony's faceplate are retracted, while Gaius moved with slow, steady steps that drew every pair of eyes in town. The locals whispered among themselves, some recognizing Iron Man, others staring in disbelief at the golden giant who towered over everyone like a moving statue. Don't take it personally, Tony said lightly, glancing up at Gaius, as he fears that Gaius might take it to heart. You're hard to miss. I am aware, Gaius replied, his voice is calm. They stopped outside a small diner glowing with warm yellow lights. Through the windows, a handful of locals were eating late dinners, the clinking of plates and low chatter filling the air. A few tables sat outside under a metal awning, and at one of them sat a man holding a half-empty beer. He spoke animatedly to two women and an older man sitting with him. His clothes were plain, jeans, a red plaid shirt, but there was something about his posture, proud and upright, that didn't fit the look of a drifter. The wind tugged at his hair, and his eyes gleamed like he was telling a story he'd lived rather than heard. The 9 realms, the man said, gesturing with his beer bottle, are the great branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree. They are the worlds bound together by the roots of creation, connected by the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge of Asgard. The younger woman, Jane Foster, leaned in with interest. Like, actual worlds. Indeed, the man said with a small nod. Each realm is a world of its own, filled with its own peoples, kings, and destinies. At the top stands Asgard, my home. A realm of golden halls and endless skies, where my father, Odin Alfathor, rules. It is the heart of the 9 realms, where warriors feast in Valhalla and the stars themselves bow to the will of the gods. Darcy, sitting beside Jane, rolled her eyes and sipped her soda. Okay, so, you're saying you're from outer space and you're a god? Before he could answer, Jane's gaze drifted past him. Her expression changed, first curious, then startled. Thor frowned, noticing her distraction, and turned to see what she was looking at. Walking down the street toward them was Iron Man and the towering golden figure beside him. Thor's eyes widened slightly. Even without his divine senses, he could feel something from the giant, an aura, heavy and vast, like standing near a thunderhead before a storm. He rose from his chair, setting his beer aside. "Who are you?" Thor called out, his voice steady but edged with command. Tony stopped a few steps away, offering a faint grin. "We could ask you the same thing, big guy. You from Asgard as well?" Thor's brows rose, surprise flashing across his face. "Indeed I am. I am Thor, son of Odin, Prince of Asgard." The word "as well" lingered in his mind. His eyes narrowed. "As well? You have met another of my kind." Tony crossed his arms, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Yet. Your brother. Name's Loki. Ring any bells?" Thor's posture stiffened. "Loki? You've seen him?" Tony shrugged. "Seen him, fought him. He was a bit of a too arrogant. Didn't end well for him." His tone was teasing, but his smirk made it sound like a jab. Thor didn't take it as a joke. His expression darkened instantly. "You dare harm my brother?" He stepped forward, and before Tony could react, Thor's fist lashed out and struck him square in the face. Tony stumbled back, dropping his helmet, blood starting to drip from his nose. "Ow, what the hell, man?" The crowd outside the diner froze. Jane stood up quickly, shocked. Darcy gasped, nearly spilling her drink. The old man, Eric Selvig, tried to rise but froze at the sight of the armored giant now moving forward. Gaius stepped past Tony, his steps heavy but controlled. The ground seemed to vibrate faintly under his weight. His head tilted slightly toward Thor, visor glinting under the sunset. Thor looked up, suddenly realizing how much taller the being was. Still, his pride didn't fade. "I will not be mocked by mortals who strike my kin." Jane hurried forward, stepping between them with trembling hands. "Yes sir, please. My friend's he's confused. He's been through a lot." Gaius didn't answer. His silent presence alone made the air feel heavier. When he took a step forward, Jane tried to move back but brushed against his gauntlet hand. The push wasn't intentional, but the strength behind it made her stumble and fall to the ground. Darcy rushed to help her up. "Jane." Gaius's voice came low and even. "I have shown mercy. For you who is ignorant, to protect a Xeno in front of me." Thor's anger flared again. "You bastard dared to hit a woman." He swung another punch, this time with everything he had left. His fist struck Gaius's chest plate with a solid clang. The blow did nothing. Gaius didn't move. "Enough." His arm swung, a quick, restrained motion that still carried the weight of a mountain. His fist struck Thor's ribs. The sound was sharp and heavy, like a hammer striking stone. Thor gasped and dropped to one knee, clutching his side. "Gaius." Tony stepped forward quickly, raising a hand. "Stop. He's down." The Golden Warrior halted. The look he gave Thor wasn't one of hatred, only quiet judgment. Tony crouched beside Thor, rubbing his own bruised nose. "All right, tough guy. Let's try this again without the punching. What brings you to Earth?" Thor looked up through the pain, eyes burning with pride. He didn't answer. Gaius watched silently for a moment, then turned his gaze toward Jane and Darcy. He stepped closer, and before anyone could stop him, he reached down and lifted Jane easily by the arm. She gasped, her feet leaving the ground. Darcy froze, unsure what to do. "Hey! What are you doing?" Tony said sharply. Thor's face twisted in rage. "Put her down, you bastard!" Tony didn't move to stop Gaius immediately. He saw what the Ultramarine was doing, forcing the truth out. "Talk," Tony said quietly to Thor. "Tell us why you're here." Thor's fists clenched. "Release her." "Tell us," Tony repeated, voice calm but firm. Thor's shoulders slumped slightly. "All right. Enough. Put her down, I will tell you everything." Gaius lowered Jane gently, her breathing shaky and fast. Darcy caught her before she fell. The moment Jane's feet touched the ground, Gaius stepped back, silent once again. Thor breathed hard, glaring at them both. I was cast down, he said slowly. Stripped of my power and sent here by my father, Odin. I was meant to learn humility, to live among mortals until I am worthy again. Tony blinked. So you're saying this was, like, a royal timeout? Thor ignored the sarcasm, holding his side in pain. My hammer, Mjolnir, was sent here as well. Only the worthy may lift it. Gaius's head turned slightly, his tone low. The weapon we found in the desert. Thor's eyes widened. You've seen it? Tony sighed. Yet. Big crater, a hammer, nobody can pick it up. Sound familiar? Thor nodded weakly, realization dawning. Then it still rests where it fell. Tony wiped his nose with a napkin from a nearby table. Well, your lesson in humility could use some work. You punch first and talk later. Thor looked at him, then gave a tired grin despite the pain. Perhaps. But you insulted my brother. Yet, well, Tony said, smirking faintly, he deserved it. Gaius stood silent behind them, his visor faintly reflecting the sunset. His voice came softly, almost to himself. Emperor, this world is quite peaceful even when it has many forces. Though the Emperor inside him didn't respond to him. Thunder rumbled somewhere far off, a low growl rolling across the desert. Jane, still trembling slightly, glanced up at Gaius, then at Thor, then back to Tony. Can someone please tell me what's going on? Tony exhaled and gestured vaguely between the two men. Long story short? Your crazy drifter here is an actual god, or at least according to myth they are Norse gods. And the guy in gold armor, well, let's just say he's not from around here either. Darcy muttered under her breath, yet, no kidding. The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of rain though the sky was still clear. Thor looked toward the horizon, where the clouds began to gather faintly, his voice quieter now. I must return to my hammer, he said. If it truly still rests where it fell, then my path is clear. Tony glanced at Gaius. The giant gave a small nod. Then we go together. As the three of them turned toward the desert road, Jane and Darcy watched them leave, speechless. Eric Selvig finally exhaled, shaking his head. I think, he said softly, we just met a true god and a giant and well Iron Man. Jane didn't answer. Her heart was still racing. The image of Gaius lifting her like she weighed nothing wouldn't leave her mind. Chapter 57 The Worth of a God. The sun dipped lower over the desert, painting the sky with streaks of gold and orange. A soft wind carried the smell of sand and hot metal across a quiet roadside cafe. Agent Phil Coulson sat outside at a metal table, stirring his coffee. Across from him, Natasha Romanoff leaned back in her chair, sunglasses hiding her eyes as she scrolled through the latest field report on a tablet. They should be eating at that diner right now, she said quietly. Coulson nodded, taking a sip. Good. Let's hope it stays that way for at least an hour. He had barely finished speaking when the comm shattered. A sharp metallic whine echoed from above, followed by a deep thud as something heavy landed near the cafe. Dust kicked up around the parking lot, rattling a few parked cars. Both agents stood instantly, hands moving to their weapons. From the haze emerged Iron Man, armor glinting faintly in the sunset. Behind him came the giant in gold, Gaius, his steps deep and deliberate, each one pressing the sand flat beneath his boots. Walking beside them was a tall man in a torn red plaid shirt and jeans, his hair windswept, his bearing proud. Natasha lowered the tablet she was holding, slightly, brows knitting. Well, so much for my coffee time. Coulson blinked, then stepped forward. Didn't you just come from the site? He asked, eyeing Tony. What's going on? Tony's faceplate slid open, his voice quick and irritated. Bring us back to the hammer site. Now. Already. Coulson frowned. You didn't finish or even started eating. And, who's this guy? He asked, nodding at the tall stranger beside them. Tony gave a dry laugh. Didn't have time for dinner. Turns out this guy's Loki's brother. You know, the same Loki that our golden friend here fought at the crater. That made Coulson pause. His eyes flicked toward Thor, then back at Tony. He's Loki's brother? Then, wait. His eyes widened slightly as realization hit. That makes him. Thor straightened proudly, cutting in before Coulson could finish. I am Thor, son of Odin. The god of thunder, protector of Asgard. And I command you, mortal, bring us to my Mjolnir. Coulson blinked twice. Mjolnir? Oh, the hammer. Thor gave a single firm nod. The weapon that was sent with me. Tony sighed and waved a hand. Yet, let's move. Coulson hesitated for a moment longer before gesturing toward the direction of the Quinjet, where they landed. All right. Let's go. The Quinjet flew through the fading desert light. When they finally landed near the perimeter lights of the crater, Clint Barton was already there, leaning against a jeep, bow slung over his shoulder. He looked up as Coulson stepped down. What's going on? Clint asked. You just left and came back immediately. Coulson nodded toward the approaching figures. That's Loki's brother. The one Gaius fought earlier before he vanished. Clint's brow rose. Brother? Asgard again? Yet, Coulson said, exhaling. And he wants his hammer back. They both watched as Thor climbed the small ridge overlooking the crater. Gaius and Tony followed behind him, keeping a careful distance. The hammer sat in the center, gleaming faintly in the light. The moment Thor saw it, his expression changed, relief mixed with pride. He stepped forward, spreading his arms slightly. Now, he said, his voice echoing across the empty site, you will see that I am no liar. I am Thor of Asgard, and this is Mjolnir, my companion and my power. Tony crossed his arms. Showtime. Thor reached down and gripped the hammer's handle. The metal felt familiar against his skin. A small smile touched his lips as he tightened his hold and pulled. Nothing happened. The smile faded. He frowned, pulling again, harder this time. Still nothing. His breath quickened. Sweat rolled down his temple as he braced his feet and gripped with both hands. The sound of straining muscles filled the silence, but Mjolnir didn't budge an inch. Tony finally sighed. Any day now, Sparkles. Thor ignored him, giving one last roar of effort, pulling with everything he had left. But the hammer remained still. At last, he let go, stumbling slightly. His shoulders slumped as he stared at the weapon that once defined him. Tony tilted his head. So, what's the lesson here? Hammers ghosted you. Thor said nothing. His knees hit the dirt, eyes locked on Mjolnir. For the first time since arriving on Midgard, there was no pride in his face, only disbelief. The silence that followed was heavy, almost painful. Tony glanced at Gaius. This is, pretty pathetic, hey. But Gaius didn't respond. His gaze wasn't on Thor or the hammer. His helm turned slowly, facing the direction of the distant hills. His voice came low and even. I sense it again. Sense what? Tony asked. Gaius didn't answer. In a sudden blur of motion, he started running, his massive form moving faster than any normal man could. Each step sent small vibrations through the ground, leaving deep prints in the sand. Tony blinked. Wait, hey! Where are you going? When the giant didn't stop, Tony cursed and shot into the air, following the trail of dust. You could say something before sprinting off. The S.H.I.E.L.D. agents watched the two vanish into the distance. Coulson exhaled. And there goes our quiet evening. Gaius came to a halt near the edge of a small ridge overlooking the nearby town. His golden armor caught the last rays of sunlight, gleaming faintly as the wind carried dust around his feet. His helm turned slowly, eyes locking onto figures walking below. 4 strangers, a woman, and 3 men, dressed in strange armor that wasn't of earth. They walked with purpose, their movements disciplined, powerful. To anyone else, they would look human. But to Gaius, their presence was clear, they carried the same divine energy as the one called Thor though far weaker. Tony landed beside him, faceplate lifting. All right, big guy, what did you? He stopped mid-sentence, spotting the group below. Oh, great! More of them. Lady Sif and the warriors 3, Fondrel, Hagun, and Volstagg, stood together at the edge of the desert road. The air around them shimmered faintly from the recent passage through the Bifrost. Sand crunched under their boots as they surveyed the unfamiliar land. Volstagg grumbled, brushing sand from his beard. By the Norns, Midgard is far warmer than the stories said. Fondrel smirked. Perhaps the stories didn't expect you to eat half a feast before coming here. Sif ignored them, scanning the horizon. Focus. Thor's presence lingers here, faint but near. Loki forbade us from coming, which means it was the right thing to do. Hagun nodded. Odin sleeps, and Loki sits the throne. Deceit follows his every word. If Thor is truly cast out, then we bring him home ourselves. Before any of them could reply, the ground trembled softly. The vibration grew stronger, rhythmic, a deep metallic thud like footsteps from something immense. They turned toward the dunes. At the top of the hill, a massive figure appeared, gleaming gold in the fading light. His armor burned like the sun itself, the faint blue of his heraldry edged with ancient symbols. The air around him seemed to hum, filled with quiet power. He leaped down the slope in a single bound. The impact cracked the hard earth beneath him, a shockwave of dust and sand bursting outward. The 4 Asgardians stepped back instinctively, weapons raised. Sif drew her blade, her voice steady but wary. Identify yourself, giant. Friend or foe? Gaius straightened, silent and still, the blue glow of his visor reflecting their faces. The weight of his presence pressed against them like a storm front. For a moment, no one moved, only the whisper of wind and the faint hum of Iron Man's thrusters approaching from behind. The two sides faced one another, the warrior of Asgard and the warrior of the Emperor. Chapter 58 The God Without His Hammer. The roar of engines cut through the desert silence as a red and gold figure descended from the sky, kicking up sand in a bright flare of repulsors. The dust cleared, revealing Tony Stark, faceplate sliding open, eyes squinting against the sunlight. Let me guess, Tony said, slightly out of breath but grinning. Asgard again. The tall woman in armor, Sif, stepped forward, her sword still drawn but lowered slightly. We seek Thor Odinson, the god of thunder. Do you know where he is? Tony looked toward the massive figure standing quietly nearby. The golden warrior, Gaius, said nothing. The faint hum of his armor was the only sound he made. Tony gave him a look, and Gaius answered with a short nod. Yeah, Tony said, turning back to Sif. We've got him. Follow us. He tapped the side of his armor, opening a COMM channel. Coulson, you might want to prep the ride. We've got 4 more guests, long story. Copy that, Coulson's voice replied through static. Quinjets inbound. Tony turned back to the Asgardians. Hang tight. Our ride's coming. Sif inclined her head. You have our thanks, mortal. Her companions, Fandral, Hagun, and Volstagg, remained silent, but their gazes lingered on Gaius. The golden giant stood like a statue, calm and immovable, the sun glinting faintly across his armor. The Asgardians exchanged quiet whispers. None could tell what he was, neither god nor man, but something that carried both light and weight far beyond their understanding. Minutes passed before the low hum of engines drew their attention. The Quinjet appeared, descending through the reddish sky. It landed with a hiss of compressed air, the ramp opening as the team climbed aboard. They returned to the hammer site. The crater looked the same as before, silent, empty, marked by the faint shimmer of heat where the strange weapon rested in the dirt. Thor knelt before it, shoulders slumped, eyes distant. The light from the setting sun drew long shadows over him. When he heard approaching footsteps, he looked up. Sif. His voice was soft, disbelieving. Fandral? Hagun? Volstagg? Thor? Sif called, relief breaking through her usual composure as she ran forward. The others followed, their armor clinking as they moved. Thor rose slowly, and for a moment, his old warmth returned. He embraced each of them, holding them with genuine affection. Yet when Sif urged him toward the hammer, his expression dimmed again. Come, she said. Take your hammer and return to Asgard. Your people need you. Thor's gaze fell back on Mjolnir, half buried in the dirt. His hand trembled slightly as he looked at it. I cannot. The hammer no longer answers me. What? Fandral asked, stunned. Surely you jest. I am unworthy, Thor said quietly. I tried. Again and again. It will not move. Volstagg shook his head. Impossible. You are Thor Odinson, god of thunder. Then why does the storm no longer answer my call? Thor's voice cracked faintly. Without the hammer, I am nothing. Sif took a step closer. That's not true, Thor. The weapon does not make the man. He turned away from her. Perhaps not. But it revealed what I truly am. From a few paces away, Tony sighed, crossing his arms. God of Thunder? Looks more like the god of sulking. Fandrel's head snapped toward him, anger flashing in his eyes. You dare mock the son of Odin, mortal? Tony raised a brow. Relax. Just saying, if the hammer's the power source, maybe try charging it next time. Fandrel took a step forward, fists tightening. Before he could speak again, a shadow passed over him. Gaius had turned his head, silent, but the faint hum from his armor deepened. The air grew heavy. Fandrel froze, every instinct warning him not to move. Tony gave a quiet smirk. Good chat. Sif ignored the exchange and faced Thor again. Thor, listen to me. Loki sits on Asgard's throne. Odin has fallen into the Odin sleep. Thor's eyes flickered, pain and guilt passing across them. Then the throne is his. He always longed for it. Loki deceives, Sif said firmly. He has turned your exile into opportunity. We came to bring you home. Thor shook his head. I cannot return. Not like this. The silence that followed stretched long. The desert wind blew, scattering sand across the crater. Then, a low rumble echoed from the horizon. Gaius's helm turned sharply. Something comes, he said, voice calm but deep. The others followed his gaze. A column of shifting light descended from the sky, a beam of the Bifrost. When it faded, a tall figure stood in the distance, gleaming silver in the dying light. Its face was blank. Its body smooth and metallic, plates moving with unnatural precision. Sif's eyes widened. The destroyer. The creature's head tilted toward them. Lines of orange light flickered to life across its face, glowing hotter until the air began to shimmer. It's going to fire. Sif shouted. Move. The beam erupted from the destroyer's face like a storm of fire. Tony shot into the air, evading the blast. Gaius, move your... But Gaius didn't move. He planted his feet, shoulders squared, and faced the blast head-on. The beam struck him, and for the first time Gaius uses activated his golden halo, above his helm, expanding into a shimmering barrier. The fire hitting the barrier, but it didn't touch Gaius, but the impact pushed him back several steps, digging trenches in the earth. The ground trembled. Heat waves rolled off the blast, distorting the air. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Dust fell. The glow faded. Gaius remained standing, a barrier surrounding him, and his armor remained shining and clean. Tony hovered above, eyes wide. Okay, was that a force field? The Asgardians seized the opening. Sif led the charge, leaping onto the destroyer's back, her sword sparking as it cut across the armor. Hagun followed, striking at its legs, while Volstagg swung his axe with a roar. Their blows landed, but every wound they made began to close, molten metal flowing back together. It heals. Volstagg yelled. By the All-Father, it heals. The destroyer retaliated, slamming its arm down. The ground erupted, hurling all four warriors aside. Thor shouted, running toward them unarmed. No. Stop. But he was powerless to do anything. The destroyer raised its hand again, light gathering in its chest. Before it could strike, a blur of gold cut through the air. Gaius moved, fast, far faster than something his size should. His power sword ignited with a sharp crack, blue lightning running along its edge. The blade sliced clean through the destroyer's torso, splitting it in two. The halves hit the ground, but then began to reform, metal twisting, fusing back together. Sif shouted, "It cannot die." Odin forged it himself. Gaius's eyes narrowed behind his helm. Then I will unmake what he made. He continued slicing the destroyer, but each time it repairs by itself every time it was cut. Gaius stepped forward again. The air around him shimmered faintly. Inside his mind, a voice resonated, deep, calm, commanding. Then burn what can't be remade. End it. The words carried warmth and majesty, a voice he knows very well and will never forget. Gaius's sword flared, blue turning gold, and flame erupted along its edge. He gripped it with both hands and plunged it deep into the destroyer's chest. The fire spread instantly. Gold and orange flames devoured the metal, eating through the runes that held it together. The destroyer struggled, its limbs seizing, molten light pouring from its cracks. Then it screamed, a grinding metallic wail, and collapsed into a glowing heap of slag. Silence followed. Only the wind moved again. The Asgardians stared. The molten remains cooled slowly, steam rising from the blackened ground. Gaius stood over it, sword still glowing faintly before the light dimmed away. Tony landed beside him, faceplate open. "Okay," he said slowly, "I didn't know you were capable of doing something like that." Gaius didn't respond immediately. His voice came calm and steady. "The threat is over." Sif lowered her sword, still staring. "That construct was the All-Father's will made flesh. And yet you destroyed it." Gaius looked at her briefly, didn't respond to her. Tony exhaled, looking toward Thor, who stood quietly beside Mjolnir. The Asgardian's reflection shimmered faintly in the metal. His hand hovered above it but did not touch. "If only," Thor whispered, "I could be of any use." No one spoke after that. The sun dipped lower, leaving long shadows stretching across the sand. The wind carried away the last traces of smoke and heat, leaving only the silent hammer, and the god who could not lift it. Chapter 59 Fate shifts in the heavens. The air was still thick with smoke and heat from the battle. The desert shimmered faintly under the fading sun as Tony Stark knelt near the smoldering crater. His armor hissed quietly, small jets of air cooling the plating as he scanned the twisted, glowing remains of the destroyer. "Jarvis, give me a material read," Tony said, his voice echoing through the suit. The HUD flickered, lines of data scrolling rapidly. Material composition, unknown. Traces of high-density metallic compounds, unlike any earthly alloy. Energy readings remain unstable. Tony frowned. "Unstable? It's literally a pile of melted junk." "Correction," Jarvis added, "this junk is still radiating residual energy consistent with high-level unknown energy." Tony leaned closer, brushing off a clump of cooled metal with a metal-clad finger. "High-level unknown energy? You mean magic?" Before Jarvis could respond, a heavy step approached behind him. "Do not mock what you do not understand, man of iron," came a deep voice. Tony turned, finding Thor standing tall again, the wind tugging at his tattered coat. The sadness in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by quiet resolve. "Magic, science." Tony shrugged. "Same thing with a different user manual." Thor gave a faint, tired smile, then looked down at the slag. "That armor that was destroyed are called the Destroyer, it was forged of URU, a metal born from the heart of a dying star. Nearly indestructible, and a conduit for the All-Father's enchantments." Tony raised a brow inside his helmet. "Nearly indestructible, hey? Guess your definition and mine differ, because I just saw our golden friend slice it like birthday cake." Thor's gaze turned toward Gaius, who stood a few meters away, silent beside the hammer resting in the dirt. The towering warrior's armor gleamed faintly in the low light, gold and blue catching the sunset. He reached up, unlocking his helm and removing it. The magnetic clasp sealed it neatly to his side. For a moment, the Asgardian saw his face fully, stern but calm, marked by discipline and the faint weariness of countless battles. His eyes held the stillness of someone who had been in countless wars. Gaius looked around the field once more, confirming no more threats lingered. His deep voice broke the silence. "It seems everything is done. I should return to my world." Tony looked up at him, then around at the tired group, Thor, the warriors three, Sif, all catching their breath amid the wreckage. The billionaire smirked lightly. "Well, it does look like quitting time. But before you warp off to where you came from, Gaius, won't you eat first?" Gaius paused. It was hard to tell through his stoic expression, but there was a faint softness in his gaze. "Very well," he said simply. "One meal, then I depart." Tony grinned. "That's what I like to hear. Let's pack up before something else from space drops in." They came back to the small desert town was quiet again. The people here are unaware of what happened as that was quite far away and was sealed by the S.H.I.E.L.D agents. They came to a diner where Thor, Tony, and Gaius first met. Tony sat at one of the booths, armor mostly off, sipping coffee with one hand and poking at a burger with the other. Across from him, Gaius mostly stood as there are no chair that hold his size. Even in his armor, every movement of his hands was controlled, precise and deliberate. On the next table over, Thor and his friends laughed quietly, eating as if they hadn't seen food in years. Sif's usual stoic manner had relaxed, even Volstagg seemed more subdued after the battle. For a while, there was only the hum of the lights and the clinking of dishes. Tony leaned back in the booth, stirring what was left of his coffee. "You know," he said, glancing around the small diner, I didn't think Asgardians actually did normal stuff like this. Eating, sitting, talking. I figured it was all lightning and battles. Sif smirked. We do enjoy more than war, Stark. Feast, drink, song, these are parts of life too. Fondrel leaned in with a grin. Especially the drink. Tony chuckled. Yeah, I got that impression from Thort. Volstagg laughed, the sound booming through the room. Indeed, Thor is one of the best drinker on Asgard. Tony rolled his eyes. Yeah, it seems good to be proud of that. Sif crossed her arms, amused. Our ways are different from you mortals. Tony took another sip and smirked. Maybe. You people make the world a little less boring. Gaius said nothing. He's simply eating to his meal, and the rest continue their conversations. Far away, in the golden halls of Asgard, the night burned with cold light. Loki sat upon the throne, one leg crossed over the other, the gleam of the casket of ancient winters fading nearby. His expression was sharp, but his hands trembled slightly. The moment he lost connection with the destroyer, a chill crawled through him. He stood from the throne abruptly, anger burning beneath his fear. That thing, he hissed. That man destroyed my father's greatest weapon. He paced the steps of the throne room, every movement quick and restless. Thor's friends defied me, left Asgard without my consent, and now Midgard stands unpunished. His eyes flicked toward Heimdall's sword, the key to the Bifrost. Cold determination filled him. Then I shall finish what I began. Jotunheim falls first. Midgard after. Grabbing the sword, he strode toward the observatory, frost still clinging to the door from where Heimdall lay frozen earlier. He stepped inside and slammed the sword into the control pillar. The Bifrost roared to life, casting a blinding column of light across the cosmos. As the portal aligned toward Jotunheim, a soft voice echoed behind him. Stop it, Loki! He froze. Frigga stood at the entrance, her eyes sorrowful. This is not the way, my son. Do not call me that. Loki's voice cracked, pain mixing with rage. I was never truly your son. Just a monster taken from the cold. He raised the sword again, ready to release the beam, when a firm hand gripped his shoulder. Stop it, Loki! That voice, older, deep, unyielding. Loki turned slowly. Odin stood behind him, the weight of his presence filling the chamber. His single eye burned with quiet disappointment. Father! Loki's voice faltered. You were sleeping. Odin finished. No longer. He reached forward, easily pulling Heimdall's sword from the console. I am disappointed in you, my son. Loki stumbled back, the strength leaving him. Frigga rushed forward, holding him as he sank to the ground. Odin turned to the guards who had followed. His command was clear and cold. Imprison Loki Odinson, for deception of the throne and endangerment of the 9 realms. He will remain in the dungeons until he repents. The guards hesitated only briefly before obeying. Loki said nothing as they took him away, only casting one last look toward his father, half hatred, half sorrow. When the chamber emptied, Odin stood alone at the controls, the Bifrost slowly powering down. He gazed into the shifting lights of the cosmos. Fate has changed, he murmured. Someone has altered destiny. He focused his sight toward Midgard, toward his son Thor. But it was not Thor who had felled the destroyer. The image shifted. Odin's gaze fell upon the golden warrior sitting calmly in a small diner, eating beside men and gods alike. The one who destroyed the weapon of Asgard. Odin whispered. Who are you, warrior of gold? At that same moment, Gaius paused mid-bite. His eyes narrowed faintly, sensing something distant, an ancient, watchful presence pressing faintly against his mind. He slowly turned, looking upward at the diner's ceiling, though his gaze seemed to pierce far beyond it. Tony noticed. You good, big guy? Ceiling fan giving you a hard time. Gaius blinked once, the faint hum of his armor rising before fading again. Nothing. He looked back at Tony. It's nothing. Tony raised an eyebrow but didn't push it. Right. Sure. Nothing. You know, you really gotta work on your poker face. Outside, the night settled over the desert, quiet and calm. Yet far above them, unseen by all, the eyes of a god still watched, curious and uncertain of the future. End of chapter 59. Fate shifts in the heavens.
Thanks for listening.